Hello, welcome to our third edition of Victory Never Sleeps live stream. Hello, welcome to our third. We're working on some of the settings here, but I appreciate you guys' patience. I appreciate you guys showing up. This week, we've got a very special treat for you guys. A good friend of mine, a very, very significant guy in the Asatru Folk Assembly, Witan Svan Herul. Many of you guys may know Svan, and if you do, you're fortunate. Some of you guys may not have gotten a chance to get to know him at all yet, and hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll know him a little bit better. Welcome, Svan. Good to see you.
Hi, how's it going? Glad to be on here.
Good. We're glad to have you. This has been a really cool thing the past couple of weeks, and I have every reason to expect it's going to continue to be a cool thing tonight. So folks know, thank you for those of you guys joining us on YouTube, and thank you also for the folks joining us on Entropy. Folks on Entropy are able to send tips and super chats. And if it gets super busy, those super chats are going to go to the front of the line when we're in order of answering stuff. I know we had a lot of questions last week that were backed up. Yeah, and to everybody who donated last week, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. And yeah, any donations, they absolutely get put to good use. So thank you so much. Svan, tell us a little bit about yourself and I don't know, your what brought you to where you are now in the Asatru Folk Assembly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, my name is Svan Herul. I'm from Virginia. I was not born in Virginia, but I've lived here pretty much all my life since I was very young. I came to Alsherjargothi when I was very young. I was about 13 years old. Back then in the early 90s. Back then in the early 90s, there was not a lot of, there was no internet. There was not a lot of that stuff. So ended up mainly through books and book clubs, like ordering sites where you could get them in magazines and things like that. So I was picking up books and reading a lot. And I practiced pretty much solitary by myself for a very, very long time, up through until about after my time in the Marine Corps. And after that, I ended up kind of realizing there was a larger community and kind of interacted with people that were available to me, like people that I had nearby. And again, even then in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of internet interaction going on. I think we were utilizing meetup.com for early kindred kind of things. And then we eventually moved on to, you know, local gatherings and different things like that. But I was pretty much unaffiliated for many, many years. I had really started my own kindred, and then it fell apart, while at the same time kind of, you know, moving in and out with the East Coast thing. And I even attended a troth moot early on in 2009, I believe. And that was actually the first time I ever heard Founder McNallen hailed that symbol at a troth moot, which was I didn't know at the time, or it didn't seem to have that vibe. I think the troth back then was a little different. And but yeah, so that was the first time I really got introduced, and from then on, it was a steady and slow progress till I kind of left and became solitary again and had a religious, I guess, awakening, if you will. And I sought the Asatru Folk Assembly out on a winter nights and back in 2016, I believe. And that was out on a winter nights and back in the one that you had spoken at, and then from there on out, the rest is history.
Well, yeah, what year was this that you were saying that at a troth moot they actually hailed Steve?
I believe it was 2009. It was a long time back. I mean, again, my time in Asatru has been, it's by 2007. So before 2007, I was pretty much solitary, and then after that, I had interactions with the Alsherjar community in large, and me and a friend of mine had made a trek out to Ohio, to the Trothmoot there, to see what was going on, what it was about, and back then there was a pretty eclectic, I guess, council, or their leadership was pretty eclectic. I think there was even one folkish kindred leader that was on back then, and there were people that had attended who hailed Founder McNallen at the Symbol. So it was, like I said, it was an interesting time. I think that really I was a novice as to things that were going on around me, but at the same time, there was not so much, I think, crazy polarization in the community at large from them. I think the AFA is always maintained, but for them, they seemed pretty neutral back then. But over time, I started to see things that I didn't really come to agree with. And so I kind of went on my own for a long time. And then when I had, on a suggestion to come to Winter Nights for the Asatru Folk Assembly, and it just happened to be the one that you were speaking at. And yeah, that was it. What you had a speech there, like an introduction speech, and just an introduction to yourself and everything going on, and I absolutely knew I had hit the mark, that I was home, and I had a great time, and I ended up just I made a kindred, and we started right then and there. That by Yule we had a kindred up and running, and we were all members of the AFA, and then it started to proceed from there. Then it got pretty clandestine as far as all the glory and temples, and constructing hofs to our gods, and then it went far beyond I'd ever thought I'd ever be involved in.
Well, that's fantastic. We sure are fortunate to have you. You had kind of I don't know, more of a meandering journey here than I think a lot of our current members, certainly. So one reason that I wanted to have you on this evening to talk to folks, for those that may not know, Svan is the artist that has he has been responsible for painting all of our God murals at our hofs. And those are really special, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about those. But significantly, Svan spent the last week down at Njord's painting a spectacular mural for Njord. And Svan, could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Specifically Njord's, or just in general?
Specifically kind of, going down there, checking out Njord's, what you thought, and then the painting process. I see Nick just pulled up the 3 murals of our previous hofs, again, all done by Svan. If you've seen them in person, you know how powerful they are. It doesn't do them justice to see them on here, even though they're still beautiful. But yeah, tell us a little bit about last week's experience for you.
Yeah, so I ended up driving down to Florida from Virginia, and it was a wonderful drive. Coming into the state of Florida, I was blessed to see Thor just ruling the skies as I came in, and big columns of lightning, and it was a very surreal moment kind of coming into Florida, as it is same here in Virginia, very flat, and you can see a lot of sky. And so coming down into Florida, it was just all sky and thunderstorms, and that was kind of how I entered the state. And I was met there by membership, and they greeted me and got me in, and like most all other you know, tasks with the murals. I pretty much live there for the duration. There's no hotels or none of that. It's sleeping in front of the murals, and working on them from about anywhere but 10 in the morning to like 3 in the morning the following day. Just trying to get a massive amount of stuff done. I've got a process now in which I can allow to paint things and then let it dry and move on, and so on and so forth. And I enlisted some help immediately as I got down there. I had Gothi Plord and Githia Plord helping, so put them to work, and they were going at it right away. And then Gothi East, he came down and he helped out, and had some other membership that were wanting to kind of weave their weird into the wall. And so they were putting in waves and colors and little things. And then basically, you know, after getting that base coat down of color, it's to move on into detail and things like that. And one thing about Njorshof is, I guess, the difference between, let's say, Thorshof or Baldershof and Njorshof is the horizontal space that's there. It doesn't have a lot of vaulted space, but it's very, very wide. And one thing that was access to me that I've never had before was 3 panels of wall to work with, and to just kind of stretch my whatever I wanted to do. And so it added a whole new dimension of some other elements I wanted to place in. But these murals, I mean, I think it's really important for folk to know, like, I'm not a mural painter. I never was a mural painter. I started out doing calligraphy, drawing on paper, and then even like dabbled around in tattooing for a time in my life when I was younger. And I never thought I would, you know, I would never thought I would be doing something like this. So when it was kind of shot out, I feel like you tasked me with addressing the vacancy of space at Thorshof, and I took up that challenge. There was something magical that happened that first time, where all of a sudden the process just, like, I knew what to do, even though I had never done it before. I knew about spacing. I knew how to space things. I tried things with you know, tape and other things to, like, make sure that proportions were correct, because we're working on such large scales of wall, from, you know, 16 feet wide to 15 feet tall. And even at Baldershof, like, the bottom of the mural doesn't start until I think at the 8 feet mark. So I was doing that all entirely on a ladder. So none of these processes, I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing when I get there, but for some reason, it all seems to work out. It all seems to make sense.
Well, I think it's important for folks to realize, you know, you say you're not a mural painter. I think by now you are officially a mural painter, but you started painting these as, you know, in one sense as a priest to our gods, but in another sense as a worshiper of our gods. And these paintings aren't just beautiful works of art, they're powerful acts of worship. And I think that comes through when you're standing in front of them. I certainly feel that. We got some questions for you over here on the side.
All right.
So Cody wants to know, Svan, do you think that your time as a solitary made your belief stronger with the gods and brought you closer to the folk?
Yes to the first and no to the second. Well, actually, perhaps later it did. Yes. I mean, when I was solitary, that was the one thing that was always a void, or was devoid of, was folk community. And perhaps that made me focus on it more when I finally entered into that sphere. But my relationship with the gods, yes, absolutely. I have been all over the world. I've honored the gods on volcanoes in Hawaii. I've honored the gods on top of Mount Fuji in Japan, and I've even held a bloat on the Euphrates River in Iraq when I was there. So I've carried the gods with me, and I've carried the gods with me through some very tough and troubling times, I think, for our country and for any young man, being placed in these situations, having to deal with certain things, coming to terms with certain things about life and death and all of this. And all the while, the gods were with me. And it built a rock solid, extremely burning, passionate relationship with the gods. I take that second to none. Of course, I have a deep love for my ancestors, but the relationship that I had with the gods throughout those years formulated so much of my spiritual growth and outlook and view of the world, and also too my readiness for a lot of what was to happen if bad things happened, and good things too. So I mean, yes, while I was solitary or alone, I practiced my faith in my gods as I would say almost like I don't know, alone, like a lone practitioner, a lone pilgrim. I don't know. I wandered the world with the gods with me, and held bloat wherever whatever dusty, terrible places I stood in. And I took time to. I had a small horn, and I put down my rifle and hold bloats. Sometimes with nothing more than MRE electrolyte juice. It was what I had, and it was, yeah. It definitely formulated a lot for me. But when I got out of that solitary break, when I finally got out of the Marine Corps, I was desperate for community, but I was also coupled right then with some troubling issues that I had. I think for a long time I was dealing with things that I had seen and things I had been. And so even though the gods were with me, it doesn't make us infallible of mental problems, things that we needed to I needed to work out. I was depressed for many years after the war, and I went through a long process, and I think at that point I found community, and community is kind of what, well, at first I think it didn't help at all. It may have been an outlet of some of my problems and things, but over time and meeting the right people in the community, it eventually led me to healing and coming to an understanding about things, and then led me to the Asatru Folk Assembly and to the discipline that I needed in my life again, because I had it in the beginning, especially in the military, and then it kind of dwindled, and then it came back again. It refocused me, made me realize that there was a new mission, a new ideal, something that, the time can't be squandered. Perhaps even more important than what I was doing overseas while I was in the military.
Well, I think that's a really powerful story for a lot of folks. I know that I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I know that on here frequently I talk about, how doing it right is not being a solitary practitioner. Doing it right is doing it with a group. But I think this is really strong testimony that, and I've always said this too, when you don't have that option, and, for guys that are in a spot where you can't do it as a group, there's a lot of power in doing it as a solitary practitioner. But it all comes into fruition, and it all connects and becomes,
Yes,
the way to do it when you're able to do it as a group. And I'm really glad that Svan's solitary practice has brought him to us. I hope he's better for it, and I know that we're better for it. We've got a tip from Caesar Leo. Appreciate you. Thank you for the tip. And he comes with a question. He wants to know if we can explain how a baby naming ceremony works. So there's the purpose and the mechanics. In the condensed version, I suppose, the purpose is that when that new baby comes into this world, into Midgard, there's a time where it's becoming a whole person. And to fulfill its soul complex and to set that baby's identity, not just as an individual, but as a part of a bigger whole that is our folk, and specifically that is our AFA family. There in front of the gods and in front of our folk, we affix the name that the parents have chose for the child. And from that moment on, that child is a full person with their soul complex. Some of that evolves from a time where infant mortality was very high. And so before we fully invest that child with the finishing touches of that folk soul, we want to make sure that the child is viable and physically healthy to have a good start in life. And so I think that's part of that. Usually it's done, at least 9 days after the birth. In this day and age, stuff comes up, and sometimes people will hold off until there's a gathering in their area. So it's sometimes a little bit more than those 9 days. One thing that's an AFA tradition that I do, and that now the AFA does, is, if you have time the night before, if you get to meet the child, meet the family, I draw runes, and I ask each of the Norns to give that child a blessing and a rune to set their course and to kind of inspire and instill gifts to them. And so a rune for Erd, Verdandi, and Skuld. So I draw those, and I read those to the child and the parent and my interpretations of those blessings to them. And we affix those with mead, drawing those runes on the child's forehead. And then when we give them their name, we splash them with water, as our ancestors did, to imbue them with that name and announce them in front of the folk. And when we do that, we also drink toasts to that child and to that family. And as a group, we make commitments to be there for, to protect, to help provide for, to help raise that child in a way, and to really welcome them into our faith community. And so that's really special. That's probably my favorite thing I get to do as a Gothi. Svan, do you have anything to add on that ceremony?
Yeah, I'm a particular fan of your formulation of our current and way that we fasten names to babies. I think, a long time ago, people did them certain different ways. They had like locality traditions, things that they would do in order to affix names, things that maybe if they weren't able to get to the Hoffs, or back then there were no Hoffs. So, one of my children, we were lucky enough to have great grandmother and grandmother and mother all there with the baby, holding the baby while the name was being, fastened and sprinkled. And that was done, at the house because, especially for my first boy, there were no temples then. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of beautiful things that can be added or done, but when you have a community and you have a priesthood that you can now kind of rely on or ask for help or seek guidance or even to wait, or some people do, like they'll name fasten their child at home, but then they'll wait to the next event and they'll come and introduce them and do a name fastening ceremony at the temple and get a chance to introduce them to all the folk. I think it's beautiful. It's a huge and momentous evolution that's happened in such a short period of time, from having nothing to now you have Hoffs and Gothar that can perform the ceremony and join in with the parents and introducing the child to the folk, all in the span of a couple of years. That's huge.
Well,
It's
so
actually
Svan,
hitting now.
we got some more questions for you. We got quite a bit of them piling up about your mural work. Sarah wants to know, how do you come up with the scenes you decide to use for the murals? Do they have hidden messages in them as far as the symbolism? I suppose let's take it from in the order that you did them and break that down for folks, or as much as you feel comfortable breaking down for them.
So I think with Thorshof, yes, there was it was absolutely drawn from Thor's fishing trip, if you will. And yeah, there was some symbolic meaning there about action and about committing to the moment and having the right time to strike, in juxtaposition to people who may stand in awe or in fear of the coming action and the pinnacle moment of weird. So that was a lot of the symbolism there with Thorshof, especially with Heimir, with his knife on the rope, and showing this kind of action of duality of Thor being that which is action and that which is doing things, completing things, having these moments, trying to attain them, using strength and might to get there. And then there's that energy of folk, or just, in that symbology there, that there might be, hesitancy, fear, or even outright cowardice to the idea of it. And all it takes is that cutting of the rope, and it seems like such an easy way, but what a great loss if it's taken. So that was kind of the symbology of Thor's mural. But as we went on with Baldershof, it was more or less a concept of space. I ended up working in a gable, and the bottom of the picture is about 8 feet up, so everything's done on a ladder, and I wanted to dominate the space. And so the idea was simply the returning of Balder, the idea of ascension outside of stasis, outside of Helgard, outside of the time out of time, and back into the divinity of heaven, and a kind of a resting moment. And there's other symbology in there as well. Obviously, the Kinfilkia of the temple being the wolves, so we placed the wolves in there. But the way that they're positioned, and particularly with Nana, and Nana to me has always been the asanya of devotion and piety. The idea that she dies of a broken heart and follows Balder into the land of shade, beyond the shade, and into Helgard, into the time beyond time. And so she is intrinsically tied. He is the folk soul, and she is the piety and devotion of the folk, kind of feeding back to him. So that's why she's carrying that horn. So there's symbology there. Again, space defines things. So with Odin at Odin's the biggest thing for me, and I have a lot of Fultrui or troth to Odin. So I wanted to encapsulate some things, and actually I ended up running into problems. I think the first and foremost was to capture, or to not even capture, to try to emulate the best I could the focus and the idea that Odin is watching, that Odin is always watching, and that his eye is unescapable. And once I got past that, I think I that just came to life on the wall. Everything thereafter, I started running into some logistical problems, and I had to change some things, and so I just started Easter egging everything I could. At that point, it became very disjointed. There was no specific story in mention. It was just Odin in front of the well, or Mimir's well, and then I began to incorporate certain things like little Easter eggs and things, and started writing in runic. And of course, by this time, that was when the folk Futhark became full, and it had started to evolve at Thorshof and at Baldershof, but it became fully manifested by Odin's. Fitting, actually, that it was manifested by then. So with Njord, it was kind of the same thing. I got a lot of space, and I make allusion, or I allude to the story of the marriage of Njord and Skadi, but beyond that, it's not any particular moment in a story. It's there's more symbolism there. And there was some other things I took some liberty on, and I really think that I addressed some pan-Germanicism or some pan Aryan religiosity in there as well. I thought that was quite a good time to address some of that. And I went on through there. So a lot of things have developed. Everything from the sun and rod behind the gods to the folk Futhark that's used in the murals and all kinds of things. So some of it's hidden, some of it has story, others it's out in plain sight. It's just ready to be read and understood. Or, it depends on if you're close up and you can see little things. I remember talking to someone and they said that they had seen the mural at Odenshof for almost a month and a half before they realized there was something in the corner, and the tree was bearing strange fruit, if you will. And as he is the Lord of the Gallows, so there was a little thing there. So there's all these little Easter eggs, little things that come to me as we're kind of going through. But first and foremost is always focusing on the Asa that's in, or the Aus that's in the wall. I'm making a godstead. I'm asking them to come and sit and have this place. This image will always be their resting spot in their own home. It's very, very honoring. And
you say that, but until you're there, I don't know if there's a way to communicate to the folks listening to this just how true that is. Something profoundly spiritual happens with those, to where the God resides in a way. A piece of that God is then in that Hof. You talked about what you wanted to accomplish with the Odin mural. That one eye, it follows you. His eye follows you in that Hof, no matter where you're at. It's very strange and magical how that works. So along these same lines, could you kind of best guess? We've got Catherine asking, how big are they? So could you best guess some dimensions for us on each of those?
Well, so Thor's Hof, his is about 6.5 feet wide by 8.5 feet tall, roundabout. I would love to give you exact measurements, but I can't remember. And then Baldur's Hof was, of course, it didn't even start until about the I want to say the 7 or 8 foot mark. I think it was 8 feet, and of course it stretched up almost to 22 feet because the ladder was a 20-foot ladder, and it could go up there. So maybe a little, it's a little shorter. First, I'm thinking of angle and safety, but yeah, it would run all the way up, and then it dimension wise, a width at the base of the triangle, I would almost guess would be 15, 16 feet wide. And that was an interesting one. Again, working on a ladder and going up and down and kind of traversing at that gabled angle. Strangely enough, I had a knee injury right before then, and I thought I was gonna die. But in actuality, when I came,
pause. Brandy does not want you to cheat her ladder. She says it is in fact a 35-foot ladder.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's why in my mind, I knew there was a little bit of safety in there. So maybe my numbers were wrong. But yeah, I think it was about 22 feet up. But there was enough room to kind of relax and be in there. But the strange thing is when I left Baldur's Hof, my knee pain was gone, as opposed to being, I was figuring it would be, flared up and hurting in massive proportions. And it wasn't. It was, I guess, some sort of recuperation or workout was happening there that allowed it to heal, even though I was going up and down this ladder. Odin's Hof was an interesting one. And Alsherjargothi, this. We had dimension issues, especially involving the structure of the temple. There was a rafter that was kind of centering everything and was in, but also kind of intruding into the situation, and we were worried about that. And there was a doorway off to the left that dominated more space than off to the right. And so even though we wanted everything to be centered, we just had to contend with those issues. And then there was also some actual structural issues with the wall, and some resurfacing, and we just kind of it was like, you know what, this is the time we have. It's midsummer, and we made time for it. You know, blocked off work and flew out and got to meet everybody, and it was a joyous occasion. It was wonderful, and but really, really focusing on this, we just pushed through it. So there was really not so much a dimension, I guess. At Odenshof, I would say it was maybe 7 feet, 8 feet wide by 7 to 8 feet tall, with a stanchion kind of placed in the middle there. And all of these, all of them except for Njordshof, which I would, is an interesting thing, is all of them were slightly off the ground, set apart by some sort of divider. Njordshof's a little different. I had ceiling to floor, but still had to make some room for us to have a harrow underneath the ouse. So, I had to adjust some things. I couldn't do some things that I have done for the other ouse on their godsteads, instead of positioning. I'll just say that much. I don't want to reveal too much. I want it to be for dedication, but so yeah, those are about the dimensions I have. Njordshof's dimensions, I would say, are maybe 10 feet on the face wall, and then 6.5 feet to 7 feet on the side walls. So I had 3 panels of panoramic view of for Njord, and it was very, very fitting.
Well, I think this is a good time to plug it. Those of you who can, White Springs in Florida on the 13th is our dedication. If that's something that you're able to and you'd like to attend, we would love to see you there. Reach out to your local folk builder. Actually, Nick, if you could throw up Lane's contact, if you need to talk to somebody, Lane is the guy I would suggest you speak to, unless you're a member. If you're a member, you're just welcome to come on out. And yeah, if you'd like to be part of that, it's really a historic thing. This is certainly the first Hof to Njord in thousands of years. And as far as we have any proof of it, it may be the first Hof that we have definitive proof exists for Njord. Though I believe in our ancestors' day, there was probably plenty, but yeah, it's really a special time. Svan, you've already kind of hit on this, but if there's anything you'd like to add, Hue Manipulation Nation wants to know, I'd love to hear the inspiration behind each mural. They stood out to me in the past.
Well, again, I mean, I kind of touched a little bit on some of the things I wanted to do. Like for Thorshof, of course, there was a dynamic meaning, but as we went along, the inspiration, again, with Baldur's Hof, I climbed up that ladder, and the first thing I put pencil on wall, and I drew a face, and that face was the face. There was nothing that changed about it. I didn't adjust it. I didn't work at it. Nothing. It was 100% supposed to be there. I wish I could say the same for Nana. I had to struggle again working with the ladder and spacing, but her being the goddess of devotion and piety, being able to take the might of the folk into the horn, and on the horn it says strength, piety, and devotion, and that she bears that horn like all the ladies that bear the mead cup to Balder, feeding him the might of the folk, replenishing him, keeping him and the hope of him alive within our hearts. And it's there's symbology there. I think with Odin's, of course, the story of him receiving his knowledge in Mimir's well, or as being one of the steps of the entirety of the wells, being able to see all that which was in order to see what will become. So the symbology there, I mean, is pretty obvious. The eye in the well, and then of course really attaining the premise that Odin is watching at all times. And then with Njord's symbology really was about laughing and having fun and being happy and absorbing the sun. And so smiling faces was kind of a hard thing for me. Drawing at large scale has always been difficult for me. So this last mural really conflicted with a lot of my already kind of set habits. Smiling faces and upturned heads and fingernails and toes and feet and anatomy, as far as like not being able to use clothes to cover things up. It was pretty. Njord is out there. He's in the sun. He is fully basking, and he's mighty and he's strong, like the waves that hit the ocean. So I really kind of got inspired with that. There was a lot of like a beach vibe. There was music being played. There was a lot of laughter and people were helping, and it was kind of, the whole time was just about relax. You've got this. Everything's okay. You can do no wrong. There's no. It kind of sounded like Bob Ross. Happy little accidents, but everything happened for a reason, and everything was good. It was very, very relaxing compared to a lot of the other murals. But other than that, I mean, inspirations are just as they kind of hit me or are laid out in front of me.
So Tim would like to know, Witan Svan, do you have a request of the folk? Everyone comes to you for so much. What would you like to see from the folk?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a very good question. I think the biggest thing would be twofold. One, devotion and piety, both within the temples and at home. So I would lump those two together. And the other is stop being fearful of telling other folk about us, telling other folk about what we're doing, why we're here, and being afraid to bridge that gap, to say, hey, this is who we are. This is our native faith. We are these people, and we have a right to exist and a right to be devoted to our gods. And you should come down and see what we're doing. Like, abolish a lot of those misconceptions. I mean, just today, I managed to talk to somebody, and I'm not saying proselytize. I'm just saying don't be so guarded. We want to shine. We want to be noble. We want to move forward and show by example. So I would say, first and foremost, really work at talking to other people and letting them know like what this is about, what we are doing, why we are devoted to the gods, and how we're building something that hasn't been done in thousands of years. And then at the same time, back to the devotion and piety, the idea of applying both Hof devotion, coming to large events, baby naming ceremonies, weddings, funerals, helping out at the Hofs, just helping the Gothies maintain the Hofs if you're able, or again, maybe focus on your local community and kindred, just as if you would to a temple. And then at home, applying and practicing and praying at home. Big one, praying. Pray to the gods. Pray to them and ask them for guidance and open yourself up to them. That's the one. Those are the two things I would ask of the folk.
Okay, so Human Manipulation Nation wants to know, what was your job in the Marine Corps? He says that he was a medic in the Army and has been in solitude and in need of community, and he can relate to you.
I was a rifleman. I was an 0311 basic rifleman. I was in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii initially, but I joined before 9/11. So I'm dating myself in my my age. I was 21 when I joined, so I was a late bloomer or an old man in the Marine Corps by those standards. Most everybody was 17 or 18. I was 21, and it was in the year 2000 that I joined. And I ended up very luckily getting sent to Hawaii. And But 9/11 happened, and pretty much I never saw the island, but maybe for 7 to 10 months. Otherwise, I was deployed repeatedly for about 4 years. Um, as far as and you being a medic in the Army, I absolutely get that, because one of the things is you're integrated into life saving. First and foremost, I would say devotionals to air, like absolutely to her as in learning your craft, a craft that can apply to you even after you get out. There's job opportunities for you with medical skills and things like that, but having devotion to the care of people, and being noble in your care, making sure that you always abide by that which is noble within you. So I would say creating hero space, create a hero. You know, find a way to devotionally express in an item or a godstead or a picture or something of the gods. And I would say, like, start off with air. If you're a healer, that's the first place to start, but not by no means the end. And create meditation, prayer, mantra, if you will. I guess that's a word that everyone's familiar with. In order, I would say it's a galder, but a mantra to affixate your mind and your body and your soul to the processes that you need to do. Conduct bloat and give gift cycle, and until you're able to move, which again it's outside of your control when you're in the military, and I understand that 100%. So basically, let go, let weird take you. I never hid from anything. I never, when they asked me, you guys got a choice, you can go here, and that place is pretty bad. I was like, well, I'll go to the bad place, I guess. And then just went. So just open yourself up to the process of weird and really focus on forging your own faith internally until you can find a space of freedom. I don't know if you're going to be a lifer and do this for the rest of your life, or if you get out, at that point, seek community, because there's no substitute for it. Use this as a foundational time to forge your faith, and open yourself up. You have to let go. You have to stop applying logic to the gods, and just really let go. And once you break that void and pass through that threshold, they show up, and they are not subtle at all. So
Svan mentioned you finding community. I noticed over on the side, and I can't read all the side chats, so guys, if I miss stuff, we've got our producer Nick filtering the questions to me separately. So, but any of the little just side comments, I catch little bits here and there. But yeah, Hugh Manipulation wanted to know if anybody wants to carpool down from the Northeast for the Hoff dedication. I think that's an amazing idea, and I really hope, if some of you guys want to take them up on that and be part of that, that would be awesome. Just throwing it out there. We've got a big tip from SC, says that they love us, and hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and hail me and hail you, Svan. So that's cool. Alistair asks, can you explain the significance of the Rhytho rune on your ring and on the vestments that are worn? Yeah, I'd like to take a stab at that. So that is the rune of, it's the rune of our priesthood. Couple of reasons for that. It was back in the Asatru Free Assembly days, and those of you who may not know, that was the predecessor organization to the Asatru Folk Assembly. A red Rhytho rune on a black field was the symbol of that organization. And so taking that history into the future, there's a lot to that rune. So much of it translates roughly to writing. A lot of people associate it with a journey. It's all of those things, but it's a lot about right action at the right time. The idea of the rider or the man on the horse has a lot of connotations to nobility, to our most ancient ancestors. the idea of being noble and taking those right actions at the right time, I feel, is the key to capturing synchronicity and to advancing our faith. So that constant admonition to do the right things in the right time and to bear yourself nobly is why that was important to have symbolizing our priesthood. And so that's why that's as prominent as it is. And on our vestments, if you notice, they're outward facing on both sides, so they're mirrored and they're faced outward. And the idea is, as the Gothi, you're projecting that to the folk that you're presiding over. You're projecting that from yourself. You're a source of that right action and a source of that nobility to inspire those around you. So exuding that is the idea behind that. And that's why we chose that. Svan, do you have any other thoughts maybe on the Rilo rune in that context?
Yeah, I think the best thing is it's a great reminder for us that we're not resting on our laurels. We don't get to. We're in constant movement. That rune symbolizes that that we're agents of a traveling power, a power that is unmoving but yet still moves and moves heavily and changes weird around it. So as the sun and the moon and the stars gained their seats in heaven, and as the gods ordered things, all things came into cycle. And that rune kind of reminds us that at these rotations, we are coming back from a great chasm. We're coming back from a great drought, where the gods, there was these cyclical moments where these returns are slowly coming. And so I think the Raido rune really, or the Raid rune, it encapsulates that reminder. As we look at it, as we bear it, we realize that we are war priests on the move. You are the highest of the war priests, and we are the war priests. I say that, and I mean that in a, from the Marine Corps, it really relates to me, the idea that this is a battle, this is a struggle, this is a return. And yes, we are trying to make community, we're trying to be noble, but at the same time, we have to keep moving. There is the constant reminder in that rune that we are establishing order as we move. We are existing within the order that already was constructed by the gods, and then we too must never stop.
Victory never sleeps.
Exactly.
Sunshine sucks. Thank you very much. We appreciate the $20. It is very appreciated. Seriously, thank you. Any of you guys on Entropy that are throwing donations our way, it's much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How old is too old for a baby naming ceremony? So that's a good question. Corey asked that question. I think that's a really good question. We don't want we don't want any teenagers with their voice changing trying to get their baby naming done. Realistically, I don't think there's a hard answer to it, but the further it goes out, the less visceral the meaning behind it, and the more it's just kind of a going through the motions. I would say within the first year is really important. I think keeping it in the first month or so is what you should do. But I think past that first year, it's kind of missed that window. But I don't think there's a hard rule on it. Svan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say if you're past that window, you could always ask the gods and your ancestors to bless and protect your child. And then, wait till now is time to focus on the time in between to, man making or woman making, and entering into the threshold of young adulthood. Focus on that time. But I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for protection over your child. But that after about a year or so, I think the gods and your ancestors and the folk are fully aware of who's here. But that's part of the kind of the rawness of us coming through that chasm. We have to deal with these things, and not all of us were born into Asatru. Not all of us were raised Asatru, and so we have to deal with a lot of that kind of missteps. And but there's no wrongness in it. We just affix and move on to the next step.
Noticing over on the side, a lot of chat going on around that carpool idea. I hope you guys I hope you guys are serious. Hope you guys do it. If you do, I'd love to share a horn with you and raise a horn to Njord with you guys there.
I'll be down there as well, so I'll be
there you go.
right there.
So the Republic of Vinland asks, are they inspired by the Greek Orthodox Christian icons? I'm going to let Svan get to this in a second, but first, I am really happy that you said that. Yes, in a way they are. I'm going to go ahead and take ownership. That's one idea that I really stressed when we were doing this, because I think that as far as European art goes, those Greek iconography is really beautiful. I really like their metallics and what they do with the gold. And I like that they fill the space with stuff that's beautiful like that. I think that goes on in a lot of different European art. I was at the Rathaus in Copenhagen, and in there, every surface on the inside or the outside is full of beauty. These intricately carved, I mean, the doorknobs are intricately carved. Every little recess, and even beautiful things that you couldn't normally see up 10, 20 feet in the air, hiding in a corner, are little elements of beauty. So really filling that space. And yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. Svan, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, definitely the idea of intricacy and detail and beauty. The idea of reinstating beauty and color was a big one for me, and brightness. And I definitely think you had expressed early on about the Orthodox Orthodox Christians' use of gold, or uses of the metallics. And so yeah, that was definitely an influence. I think that as far as people might look at, say, the sun and rod behind the gods as being a direct correlation, I mean, I would definitely point out that the idea of the solar symbol around the head definitely predates Christianity. Absolutely, they have huge lexicon of iconography towards halos, and things like that. But these do predate Christianity. The Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Hellenics. But also, too, there's a special meaning behind the sun and rod, I think, culturally within the AFA, and the idea of the attainment of the 12, and the stabilization of our faith, and a representation of their illumination and their divinity. So the sun and rod became a huge part of that. And yes, I mean, you could clearly say, oh, that's inspired by this, but it also, I was looking at, again, winged iconography from the Etruscans and their haloing, sun wheels and stones in Sweden, stone carvings with the sun wheels around their heads. So it did come from everywhere, but the use of color and the use of gold, absolutely, I think, really inspired it. If you look at some of the Greek Orthodox artwork, it is very two-dimensional. And sometimes I think it doesn't have a lot of what I think we're putting in, whereas the might and the largeness, the power, there seems to be a heavy sense of like cloth and perhaps downcast eyes and held up hands and kind of devotional spots, but there's not this kind of activated action going on in a lot of them. Even when you see like Michael slaying the dragon or something like that, it's kind of very placed. But the color that they've captured and the metallics that they use are beautiful. So yeah, but I wanted to add something that's uniquely our own, and at the same time incorporate something that's a little bit of the elder iconography with the sun and rod, but also the new meaning behind it for us with the attainment of the 12. So
yeah, I think that's kind of an important thing to note. I mean, we're not trying to ape anything, but fundamentally, you had Aryan Greek people worshiping the divinity that they were trying to worship. And I think that our people worship in a really specific way with specific art. And that's beautiful. And I think that, had some things had happened differently in the course of history, those that Greek Orthodox art could very well have been of Apollo or of Athena and not of Christ and Michael. So yeah, I think it's beautiful, and it's just really cool that they picked up on that, because I thought it was kind of a subtle nod to it, but it is something that Svan and I both discussed as an element we wanted involved in it. So I think that's really cool. We've got a couple of other monetized things. SC is our folk builder, Sierra Chapman. I'm glad to hear from you. I thought it was you the first time, but I didn't want to assume. She asks, why should folks be on the Hoftoller as opposed to simple membership levels? What are the benefits for the AFA? So fundamentally, the biggest benefit is the shift in culture and attitude. For those of you who don't know, the Hoftoller is a percentage-based giving to our church. We ask a minimum of 1%. If you'd like to do more, that's fantastic. If you make very little, 1% is a very small number. If you make a lot, then it's a big number. And us contributing that percent of our success helps us rise and fall together and share in that way. And I think that's special. But it also gets us in a place where we're donating to our church, we're donating to our gods, and we're donating to something that we believe in. Whereas the membership model, X dollars a month, is much more of a paying for a service, or there's a mindset that you're paying to get something back, and it's transactional. And even if it came out the exact same dollar-wise, the attitude is much better to what we're trying to do, the piety of donating to something as opposed to feeling like you're making a purchase. So we're really working on that culturally. Truth of it, though, the Hoftoller, that 1%, I think for most people with an average American income, just running the numbers, the average probably comes out to, that 1% being about $30. And, that helps. That money goes a long way. When we started doing the Hoftoller, it immediately elevated our ability to do things. And coincidentally, very shortly after, we were able to get both Thorshof and Baldershof. So it's really made a big difference for us. Folk the Rude threw $25 at us. Thank you so much. It's much appreciated. Says he loves the Wednesday talks and wants us to keep them coming. I've got them scheduled for a month out now with all the guests. I'm excited. I love these. I hope our guests like them. It's a lot of fun. I literally look forward to it all week. So as long as you guys still enjoy them and they're beneficial, we'll keep them coming. And as usual, we've got a bunch of questions backing up, which is really nice to see. Bob asks, to have someone with such visual intelligence is unique. It would be interesting to know if Svan has ideas on how people can see the world around them in an artistic/worshipful manner. A lot of people, I've seen this in the comments. Internally, we all tell Svan this. I think it's very self-evident that he's a guy with a lot of wisdom and a real good head on his shoulders. And people in the side are noticing that. Svan, where he's sitting, can't see the comments, so I just want to let him know. Folks think that you're a smart guy, Svan, and they are correct. What do you have to say to Bob?
Visually seeing the world. One thing I would say is attain the mythic. Understand that the gods exist in the meta. They're in a world deeply connected to us. I mean, they're not separate from us. They are connected, but you need to really start to break off a lot of the mantle of modernity. I'm not saying that we should, cast things off and go living in the woods and crazy things like that. But I mean, the idea is to really begin to open your ears, open your eyes, hear people's words, seeing things. And I don't mean in a clandestine way. The world is filled with weird. Weird pervades around us. And the gods interact with us through weird, predominantly. And I think that once you begin to realize that all the things that are flowing around, all the ripples moving in and out, that connects us to the gods, and that you can't forget. I mean, we're already, once you notice the ripples, once you notice things coming in and leaving out, and your actions kind of your noble actions leading to noble deeds, and your noble deeds leading to greater things, that's when you begin to realize that the connection between you and the gods is ever pervading all the time. And it's always through orlog or orloy or orlaw and weird. So I like to use the word weird, but it's, you know, ever pervading. So first and foremost, once you realize you're connected deeply that way, the other thing is to see yourself and see things in the mythic, see things in the meta. Understand that in essence, you should, I would say, live for greatness, project yourself towards greatness, and do this with the intention of being worthy of the gods, impressing them, asking yourself, would they be impressed with me? Would they be impressed with what I'm doing? And I mean, really ask yourself that. It's not a showcase thing. It's not about beating your chest. It's about the actions that you think you're alone in a room asking yourself, and you're really not. And to have that again, because I think that a lot of people in Asatru, there's a studying aspect to the gods, but there's never a moment where they just like, wow, I'm in weird, and the gods are in weird, and they're actually affecting weird, and they're moving things around, and I'm moving things around. And in that medium, we are absolutely connected. There's no separation between us. So if that's the case, they can see, they can hear, they can feel what I'm doing. And now that takes on a whole new consideration. Do the gods really, if they see me, then I should be concerned with the way I act, the way I talk, the moral issues that you might come in on a day-to-day basis that we might not think are deeply connected to the gods, and they are. And then once you do project yourself into the meta and kind of live, you know, with that, growing into that, being glorious in your heart and in your mind, I think that those deeds kind of begin to project more and more and more until you begin to see the world in a very beautiful way. That almost, and I don't want to sound. If somebody tells you crazy things and you say like, wow, that's kind of crazy, and that's okay, you should have that ability to say, wow, I don't know, but there's a meaningfulness that you should feel, almost like you're on the edge of the mythical and reality, that veil becomes very, very shimmering, not intangible. I'm not saying reality is to be put in the back seat, not at all. But there is a sense that the gods do move in our world in a very mythical way. There is beauty, there is joy, there is honor, there is vengeance, there's frith, there's these huge concepts moving around that the gods are interacting with, whether it's staving stability of the cosmos and keeping the edge to even the finite child rearing, having your children, taking that time to teach them, to step forward and show them things, and stop being on the phone or stop stressing about your job when your child wants to interact with you. You know, all of the gods and goddesses are involved in all of these spectrums, from the very, very big to the very, very little. So becoming a conscious of that, I think, is really important. That's how you will begin to see things differently.
Yeah, that absolutely what Svan just said, and one of the key things that stood out that he just said that I want to stress: living your life in a way intended to make your gods and your ancestors proud of you. That idea of striving to be worthy and striving to make them proud of you. I think we all conceptualize the gods a little bit different in our heads and in our hearts. But the idea really occurred to me a couple of years ago about wanting to make the gods smile, wanting the things that I do to bring a smile to their face. And I think thinking Asatru is about those relationships with the gods. And I don't, those relationships aren't exactly the same as a human relationship, and the gods are certainly far above us. But having the idea that something you do would make one of the gods of our race proud enough to smile or to nod their head in approval is really a profound thing, or it certainly is to me. So I'd throw that in there. We got a question back on the baby naming. Same question. Do you name the baby at the hospital for the birth certificate and then head to the ceremony? So, well, as far as practicality goes, the perfect scenario, you keep the name a secret. Only the mother and the father know what the name's going to be, and the grand reveals at the baby naming. In practical purposes, in this day and age, when we've got forms at the hospital and whatnot, you can be a purist about it if you want, but I think in order to make it all work smooth, certainly what we did with our daughter, we kept the name private to us until the ceremony, but with the exclusion of in the hospital with the birth certificate and whatnot, we put her name on it just because it's practical and it makes sense. I think a lot of that is fun and extra that you can add to it as part of the tradition and part of the celebration, but it's about so much more than someone knowing what the name is. It's about speaking that name in front of the gods, in front of the folk, and the gods and the folk accepting that child as one of theirs, as somebody that they recognize by that name. And I think that goes on at the naming, whether people know beforehand or not. So this is another thing, and I've seen this in the chat too. Everybody wants flags and posters of the murals. Svan, I would really like if, when we get off of here and into the future, if we could maybe see about making some prints of those murals. I think that would be a really special thing if we could figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think too, maybe we could process that with the tech department, where our Lady of Talent can maybe smooth some things out and frame it so that we can get that printed out. That would be good. That'd be an awesome idea.
I think it would be great. I'd love to try to make that happen. So more from Human Manipulation Nation. Considering Pan-Aryanism, have you all studied Buddhism or the Bhagavad Gita? I think it would be presumptuous of me to say that I've studied Buddhism and studied the Bhagavad Gita. I've read the Gita. I've learned about Buddhism, but I don't claim to be an expert on either by any means. What about you, Svan?
Yes. I mean, I've read those. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I always say it wrong. It's terrible. I've been to Hindu temples and I've been to numerous Buddhist temples all over Southeast Asia. So actually, I've gotten a lot more, I guess, a glimpse into the orthopraxy of those religions than a lot of the reading. Yes, to be honest, I have some problems with I think the foundations of Buddhism, as far as I think with Siddhartha and some of his movements. But this is whether or not we're talking about Buddhism as a philosophy or as a religion. Understanding the precepts and understanding, Mahayana Buddhism and I'm going to say it wrong again, probably. I think it's Athravadavi, the Southern style of Buddhism and their philosophical views. I'm familiar with pretty much the onset after with Buddhism and how it kind of affected Asia and how it migrated and moved through China and into Korea and how it affected Japan and things like that. But as far as foundationally, I wouldn't say have studied it. Again, that would be improper to say that. Familiar, yes, but studied by any length, not as much as Asatru, not as much as our own corpus of lore.
I think a core point I would like to make in relations to the Buddha and some aspects of a lot of forms of Hinduism. One thing that I think separates what we do from that is the very active nature of Asatru. Asatru is about doing and accomplishing and building and succeeding. And it's not about escaping the world or escaping the responsibility. That's not necessarily the way I want to put it. I don't mean any disrespect on when I say escaping the responsibilities of life, but I mean embracing them. The Buddha was an Aryan prince, and he was in a position in his life where he could have put all of his spiritual acumen into forceful use to make the world around him something better. And that's not the fundamental of what that religion embraces. And it certainly is the fundamental of what our faith embraces. So I think that's one of the things that's struck me about a difference between Buddhism and Asatru.
That was a point of contention for me as well. But I did want to say the stories in the Vedas. I'm a storyteller. I love stories. I love the power and a lot of the dynamic. Again, there's color, there's vibrance, there's war, there's death. All of these great concepts in there. I'm a fan of those. I've read those, but I've read them as reading a story of another people, and I realize there are connections clearly there. Obviously, Indra and many other things, and we could go down a rabbit hole of explaining and connecting those tissues. But for the most part, to just read them and enjoy them as stories. I've reading the stories of all people all over the world, from the Shinto and the Vedic to all the way in Siberian and Finno-Ugric to African to Native American, and whether it's South American Native or North American Native, I've read all those stories with a fan of just seeing the vibrance of their expression of their native spiritual expressions. So
speaking of storytelling and Svan the storyteller, could you give us a little bit of a preview of what we can expect on Storytime with Svan in the Asatru Academy?
Yes. So right now I'm working through the audio aspect, but eventually what's going to end up happening is there will be a visual or video aspect as well. And the intention really is a time and a place for both adults and children who are enrolled in to hear the stories and share with them, and maybe hear parts of the stories that they don't remember, or maybe that they were expressed in a different way. Something that's lost, I think, on a lot of people is how our stories came from song to poetic form. But both of those styles came from stories. And so we're bringing them back to stories, and we're allowing the paint again, a mythical picture of what was, going on with the gods in creation and things of that nature, and to kind of express a lot of the emotional, or the tangible emotional power that presides, that sometimes aren't always found in the prose. And so that's my goal, is to bring that to life, to bring a lot of that expression, and to allow, even though it is for the children, it is also for the adults to kind of hear the stories again. I've done a couple at national events, and they've really met with some good feedback. So that's what started all of this. So
Svan is great at storytelling. He's able to keep us, children and adults, but especially the children, he's able to keep them riveted. If you haven't have the privilege of it, Svan really is a beautiful storyteller, and I'm looking forward to those. Not just for my daughter, but I'm looking forward to those for myself. Svan, you mentioned earlier about when you're doing specifically the Odin mural, you talked about the folk futhark. For the people who aren't familiar with that, we have Sarah asking, could you speak a little bit more about the folk futhark and its the meaning of it coming together?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that started to formulate during Thor's mural was a chance or a medium to express ideas, and and we wanted to do that in runic. But the idea of so many people in Asatru, in the Asatru Folk Assembly, they have different specialities within the runes. They have different interests within the runes, whether they're the Elder Futhark, and some from the from Kelverstone and from the Vatstanabrekte to Edward Thorson's books and many of the modern writers, Nigel Pennick, and all of these things. So we have so much lore, and all the way down to the Armanen. So I wanted to kind of pay homage to all of that corpus of lore, and it was really inspired by something that our Alsherjargothi said, was that we're in a pinnacle time of information. We have oftentimes more information than even our ancestors may have had at any given time. 10th century Sweden, and a lot of people have a tendency to forget that we see a broader picture of things. And in doing that, I realized, wow, we have a broad picture. We have all these Futharks. So I wanted to hand pick individual runes and put them into the mural in a formalized Futhark that would be used to convey these messages. So, going through each of them, whether it was the Elder via the Kelverstone, Elder via the Vatstanabrekte, the Anglo-Frisian, the Icelandic and the Younger, and the Armanen, and started picking, and even some manuscripts I found of the German medieval runic Futharks, the tiny little one that only had 8 runes in it, and kind of pulled each from there, and I found that one through Nigel Pennick's work, and started to put them together and place them in, and then started basically constructing some rules for us to be able to translate these meanings. And these meanings, I think, are kind of more or less poetic inspiration that hits me during the process of painting. So some of them are meant to be read, and some of them you'll notice will wrap in and out of sight. They might go around an item. In reality, whatever goes around the item isn't necessarily meant to be read. It's what you can see that's ultimately meant to be read. But to keep consistency with the artwork, I would add a 3-dimensional view to it instead of the 2-dimensional flatness. That stuff was kind of written off. But that's what formulated the what we come to call the folk Futhark. And its intention was not to esoterically, push something over or say to people like, no, don't use that, use this. No, this is an absolute homage to all the Futharks, and an understanding that we have people who have all that knowledge. And if you want to read what the murals say, you might want to look into all of those Futharks so you can understand each symbol, how it might be different from, say, one particular Futhark that you're used to. So it was almost like prodding people to look at the other Futharks in hopes that they'll learn more, and we can convey those messages. So that's how that was developed.
All right, Svan, what does your day-to-day worship look like? Do you have specific times where you hold ritual in your house, or do you let it happen organically, asks Vril Vanier.
It's predominantly organic. A lot of times it's based off of either, I guess it would be a combination of thankfulness or need. I'm just being honest. Sometimes I'm needful for insight. I'm needful for I'm in a point of confusion, and I don't think it's not a sense of groveling. I'm needful of the insight of the gods, who are they're the eldest of our ancestors. They're the gods who, I think, if they're inclined to, will help us if we so deserve it. And so I always leave that option open. Yes, I'm needful for perhaps advice or insight or an understanding of things. Sometimes I don't get answers. Sometimes I do. I realize that the gods are much bigger than me, and I'm not exercising some form of a narcissism. So my needfulness is more or less a a message in the wind. If there's any insight that I could ever be offered, I would be more than happy to take it. But I also, with my ancestors who are always deeply connected to me, sometimes I address them more often with need. As far as everything else, I would say, for instance, like going to the temples is pretty regular, and aligning my weird with the wheel of the year and with the holy tides of the AFA, it brings me closer together. I have certain daily devotional things that I do. I follow I have a kind of a semi-religious calendar that I like to employ, and we every meal that we sit down at, the children, my wife, me, we sit down, we hold hands, and we give thanks to the gods. We have a food prayer that we say. Is actually given to us by Law Speaker Turnage of the AFA, and his wonderful poem. So we took that, and now our children. Sometimes it's great now. Like I'll come in from work, and the children are sitting down by themselves, getting ready to eat because I'm running late, and I'm gonna slide into home plate right at the end of it, and they're already saying the food blessing and asking the gods and the ancestors to bless them. So little things like that. If I'm outside, I have a garden. I've got chickens. I grow potatoes. So a lot of times, simple little things of pouring gifts out to the land, asking Gerda and Frere for blessings of fruitfulness in the field, things of that nature. Bounty out of the chickens. So it's kind of at home, and I've never really kind of revealed a lot of this, but I have some common practice that I do to ask for protection over my livestock and my small amount of chickens that I have, and my garden. So yeah, it's more or less steady with the temples, and then it's dependent at home. It could be every other week or so, or sometimes every night. It just depends on what's going on.
So we had a question sent to us outside of this system earlier today. Actually, I think it was yesterday that somebody wanted us to address on a live stream. I think now's a good enough time. They wanted us to speak on Survive the Jive's Pagan Futures conference that happened. I've given my 2 cents on it, and I'll follow up here. But Svan, do you have any thoughts or feelings or anything you want to say about that conference?
Well, one, I mean, it was over in Europe and it was in England, I believe. Yeah, I'm almost positive it was in England. And I think that Survive the Jive and all of them, they got some interesting points, very, very cool stuff. I've listened, driving around, definitely playing and a lot of that motivation. But as far as I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting from our perspective, because here we are doing things, projecting the future of Teutonic faith in the future in America and all over in South Africa and Australia and all these places. And this was kind of a separate thing. They were doing that and projecting ideas, and good on them. But I mean, it's kind of weird when we're off doing our own thing. I think there could have been maybe some sort of unification. I really wish they would have reached out to you, Alsherjargothi, and kind of maybe asked, come on out and give, speak or do something. But there wasn't any of that there. Again, when we talk about lore, and I think there's a big push for a reconstruction of Proto-Indo-European. I think there's some people calling it it's like Sudenheim, or it's like almost like a religiosity form of reconstructing the language and the faith. I think that's not projecting us forward. I think that's not where the gods and our ancestors were going, in one direction, and I think some folk are trying to go backwards. And so I have some contentions with a lot of that. But good on them if they're moving in that direction. But we're moving in our own, and it was made clear that way that they're doing their thing, and we're going to try to do ours. So that's my opinion on that whole situation. I didn't pay too much to that. I was focusing on the temples and things like
You were
that.
busy being a priest of Asatru and building a pagan future. That's one of the, again, I really like Thomas Rousel. He's a good guy. I've got a chance to meet him. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or be rude. I only bring this up because we were asked. There's a lot of, we've mentioned this before, and Brandy certainly mentioned it when she was on here a couple of weeks ago. Asatru, the real experience of Asatru isn't found in books. So many people think that this sphere of what we're doing here is about study and archaeology and research and not applying it in a meaningful way, which is unfortunate to me. I mean, study and research are great, but talking about our ancestors and concepts isn't, I mean, maybe the conference was misnamed. I don't know. I know a lot of the focus was on Europe, but I know that within Europe, there's thriving pagan movements in Eastern Europe. Certainly, I know there's Hellenic movements in Europe. There's folks that there are practicing priests that could have been on there to speak about religion and about actual paganism into the future, as opposed to kind of political talk mixed with history and archaeology. Their two speakers were various historians to talk about what was, to talk about pagan pasts as opposed to the pagan futures. It's just very strange to me when we spend so much time actually practicing paganism to have a conference, a big international conference about pagan futures, that the speakers are two academics. It would be, having a Christian futures conference and no pastors, no priests, but, a couple of an archaeologist and a guy who's a history expert on first century Judea. That would seem really odd and out of place. And I think in the same way, this was odd and out of place to me. We have another question. Witan Svan, how do you get so knowledgeable? If this hasn't been asked, which books or what has helped you?
Oh, a lot of books. I mean, ever since 1994, I mean, my first book was A Book of Troth by Edward Thorson. That was my first real introduction. I got it off of a book list called The Abyss or something like that. It was a pagan book list that you could get mailed to your house, and I ordered it. And that's what started me along. I think it really, I took the professing rite that was in that book when I was 14 years old, and I haven't looked back since. It's been, that was an oath that I made and have kept. But beyond that, I think some interesting books, definitely the Tier essays, the Tier volumes are one of my favorites in there. Just the collected essays. I believe you can find them on Ostara Press. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, but any of the Tier volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. But volume 1 was a pivotal one. An interesting one. I think the biggest thing to answer your question, all knowledge is applicable. It's just that you have to have the wisdom to be discerning. And so I have found me liking parts of books as opposed to the entirety of books, and being able to kind of ruminate and meditate on different ideals within the books. And so a whole title, I could recommend one, but not necessarily say that I agree with everything that's written in it. But there was some really interesting stuff that I got from it. Masks of Odin was an interesting one. I think that the connectivity there is a lot of pan-Aryanism that's mentioned in there. And so there's a lot of good, cool stuff in there that I would recommend. I think that when you engage the book, realize that also too your time. I've read books when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, 17, and didn't understand them at all. And then maybe a decade later, I pull them off the shelf and I read them, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I absolutely understand what that is now. So understanding too that a lot of times it's reiterating, going back and reading books. I'm trying to think of some other interesting ones. I was a fan of almost the how-to Asatru books for a long while there. Hammer of the Gods by Swain Wodening, and Germanic Heathenry by James Huka. I read that while I was in Iraq. I think over time I became more obsessed with kind of like The Road to Hell was a great book that I really, really delved into a lot. Hollander's translation, I know a lot of people are going to be like, boo. Hollander's translation of the Eddas, I'm a huge fan of because I'm a storyteller. And I would like to pretend I was a poet, maybe. And so the poetic value that Hollander puts into that Eddas is one of my favorites. Another little lesser known two books that I really, really enjoy. Again, storytelling is a big thing. Storytelling, I think, makes more a dynamic relationship with the stories of the gods, and that they're great to read and then cross compare with the prose. Out of those two, I would say Tales of Norse Mythology by A and E Kiri is their last names. That's A and the symbol and E. The two authors, I believe they were sisters. Kiri, and this was written in the turn of the century. They presented the gods in a very, very noble, beautiful way, almost in an Arthurian level of beauty. They talk about the gods in their palaces and the crystal salons and things that they reside in. I think that's just so amazing, and that's great for children too. That's a great one to read story wise if you're more of I want to read from book to the children. And there's another book I really like too. It's called The Northern Path by Douglas Rossman. That was a pivotal one because that's written as a storyteller would tell the stories. Now, are they all 100% based on the prose Eddas of like Falk's translation or Hollander's translation? No, they took some liberties, but they're beautiful nonetheless. And I think that they're great for the children, and they're great for us to kind of reiterate. So I think that's the biggest thing is reiteration of knowledge, taking it in different forms, seeing it in different lights has really helped me over time, layer after layer, start to learn lore and retain it just because I was seeing it from different angles.
Well, one thing, we always get the what books do you recommend question, but something that came up while you were reading these, I just want to throw out there. The One-Eyed God, it's a hard book to get a hold of, but I got a lot out of that. And then something that I really like, but I don't ever recommend on here, or I certainly don't recommend enough, was this book, Deep Ancestors. And it's really interesting. I like the book a lot. The guy who wrote it doesn't share our worldview. The intro has some obligatory PC things in it, but the scholarship and the thought in the book, once you get past the, trigger warnings or whatever, is really nice. It's a really interesting book, and I got a lot out of it. So I'd recommend Deep Ancestors, or what I like to call The Wheel and the Donkey. We have a monetized question here. Tim wants to know, Svan, can you explain the iron mark to us?
Yeah, the iron mark is not official in any way, shape, or form. So I want to bear that in mind. The Iron Mark was just a little pet project I was working on. I think it kind of started off with the idea that priests, Gothis, druids, skalds or sholds, they were timekeepers, and so the idea of keeping time in a different way became an interest of mine. And I just moved into the runic calendar, looking at um, constant cyclical calendars that maintain their days and some of the differences that lie with them outside of the Gregorian calendar. And so I also looked at the Anglo-Saxons and a lot of their timekeeping, a lot of stuff that was coming out from the modern Theodish groups, and some of their timekeeping techniques. And I ended up formulating kind of my own timekeeping scale. And I wouldn't call it a calendar per se right now. It's a timekeeper. It allows us to kind of see how our holidays move, and in correlation with the moon tides and the solar tides. It's a solar calendar first, and with a secondary lunar aspect. But it's a way to count the days and to kind of keep in mindset the moons and as they pass and the holidays that reside with them. I don't necessarily promote it in the sense that we should use a different calendar. I don't think that we need to be alien. I have my own, like, I guess I would say, nerdy problems with the Gregorian calendar, but nothing like, I'm not stating the idea that we need to be some sort of alien kind of way, but it's a hobby and it's an interesting way to look at things once you start to get it rolling. It utilizes a lot too of what I think some of the foundations of Asatru back in the early days, back in the 70s, back in the 80s, people were, talking about frost moon and, and lenting moon and Ostera moon and all of that. So that's incorporated in there as kind of more or less a nod to the actual tangible use of it. I think when people were doing it back then, it was a novelty. And so to actually make it work and be serious was, I think, another intention I was doing. So, right now we use the runic era as a year mark, and we use a 12 to 13 moon cycle, and then we use a solar reckoning of the days from 7 days a week, 52 weeks, with a day 0 being on Mother's Night, and it just repeats every year. So it's just an interesting project, but by no means am I a promoter of it in the sense that we should forego that which is clear. I'm not trying to fix something that isn't broken.
Swan and his temporal heresies. So Bobby asks, Matt, are you aware of any outrage over the new Hof being established, or has it been rather quiet from those groups? So not a lot. I think there's a complex matrix of who gets in whose ear on how those things end up happening. There's a little bit of concern in one of the local groups by the community there. And when I say by the community, I think there's maybe 7 comments on it. So the idea, I guess, is they don't want any hate in their community and they want to stand together against hate. And so to counter our dedication, they're going to have a special unity rally. That's odd to me, to have a demonstration to oppose our church coming into their town under the guise of they don't want hate. They're the first ones doing something in opposition to us, and certainly not the other way around. One of the other things that I'd add, though, to be fair, the media has done such a despicable job of painting us dishonorably and dishonestly that, if you just Google us and go off the media articles, I could understand why they're concerned. Over time, they will certainly see that we are an asset to their community and not a problem. And I will say that, the quote unquote outrage has been, let's have a rally to support unity. It hasn't been threats or anything else. At Baldershof, we had folks threatening to chain us in the Hof and burn the Hof down with us in it. and we had several of those threats. So far, we haven't had any threats of violence or anything, mean-spirited directed at us in White Springs, and I hope we can continue to not have any of that. And I know that we'll be a very good addition to their community, and they will see that. Okay, so this one's for you, Svan. From one devil to another, suggestions for those of us getting out. I recently joined the AFA and feel much better. Otherwise, the public has no camaraderie. I was an optics tech, by the way. By the way, your rifle is dirty.
As you getting out, I mean, obviously, wow. I got out in 2005 out of active, and then I went into the reserves a couple years later. First thing, definitely pay attention to all those classes that they're going to be shoving down your face when you just want to get out and drop your pack. Those definitely do help. I didn't pay attention to those, so I'm speaking from the experience of the other end. I kind of came out at a deficit because I was not wise. I was very young and stupid then. And so as an older man now, I would say pay attention to those classes. Once you do get settled, as far as economics right now, I got out in 2005, and right around that time was the housing bubble that happened. And so economically, things were really bad then. And many could say you're facing that right now. But you know what? You can get through it. It's possible. The biggest focus is where you're going to move with your career. And again, finding community. I didn't right away, but over time I found community, and that did help me and kind of guide me through, connectivity with where you're at. If you have the ability to choose where you're going to go, if you're going back home, I understand sometimes there's obligations there that keep you, and you might not, you have what you have around you. But if you have the ability to pick and choose where you're going to go, definitely think about your faith. Think about the temples. Think about the AFA. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You are a member of a reemergence of the gods in over 1,000 years, and so there's nothing saying like, oh, well, I want to move close to like my people. I want to move close to my temples. I want to move close to my gods. You think about some of the religious sects that have founded this country, and how they moved, crossing oceans, which might as well have been like crossing space to be in community with their faith. So considering that, I would say that's not like a big ask or something out of the realm. Find community, build community. If you can't find it, start your own, build, plant that flag, start a kindred, encourage people to join the AFA, to get the kindred into the AFA kindred program, and then from there, again, work on building and establishing that foundation. You need that spiritual foundation as much as you need an economic foundation, as much as you need a filial foundation. So I would say add it to your list. Make sure it's an actual definitive thing, not something that you just kind of maybe think about or project. Make it tangible. Write it down. How do you want to spiritually express yourself? Are you looking to start a family? Do you already have a family? Do you want your kids to be in community, or do you want to find community and hopefully start a family within the community? So these things write them down tangibly and focus on them. So when you get out, boots hit the ground, you can just start going straight for the throat on them. I mean, that's my advice there. I would love, if you ever want to message me about some of maybe more personal details of that and how to help, I would love to talk to you about that.
So Ruben just threw us a $5 tip. Thank you so much, Ruben. He wanted to say he loves how every guest has shown a different set of skills and personalities. Aristotle was right about the sum of the parts. Gothi Svan is our Raconteur, Braggy's influence is strong in him. Hail our creative folk. Well, hail to you, Ruben, and thank you very much for
Hail.
the tip. Cody asks, what has been the most, and he asks this to both of us, what has been the most moving ritual you've performed in your Gothi duties? Svan, I'm going to let you take this first.
I would have to say, I mean, the weddings. The weddings, I think, are by far my favorite. They seem to be the predominance, and I could focus in on one wedding in particular, but I do think overall, the weddings in and of themselves, and the vow renewals, I think, are some of the most beautiful and fun that I've ever performed. I haven't performed a ton of name fastenings, and I have performed funerals, but those aren't often fun. Those are dutiful and an expression of life, and very, very somber. So I would say the weddings have been my favorite. Absolutely, just so joyous to see these two people come together and start anew, start afresh, and kind of build more towards our community. And sometimes they, if it's a vow renewal, or if they perhaps have children from a previous marriage, and then they're deciding to come together in our church and moving forward, you can see this kind of happiness that starts to refoundation their house. It's very, very moving. So I've seen all three of those different things, and they're all beautiful.
So this is a hard question to answer because, and I think any Gothi will tell you this, no two rituals are the same. No two weddings, no two funerals, no two baby namings, no two bloats, even if they're, the same kind of bloat to the same God in the same place, but just a time apart. The energy is always different. Weddings and baby namings, I'm a crier. I can't keep a dry eye and not weep when I do those. Those are certainly really moving in that way, and in a positive and joyful way. But funerals are very moving in a very different way. I've been very honored to perform a number of funerals, and a family trusting you with that kind of last earthly send-off and honorable treatment for their loved one who's passed. It's a really heavy responsibility. It's not fun, but it is a tremendous honor, and it means so much to me that people have asked that of me. And I hope I've done those well. I hope I've done those in a way that honors the family and also the fallen. I was asked by a family that wasn't, I was asked actually by a couple of families that weren't AFA members. They were looking for a Gothi because, a member of their family was Alsatru and they didn't have someone to turn to. And it's come by my email and I was able to help. One was a family out in Elko, Nevada that I happened to, they reached out, and that's, maybe 4 hours from me. And I was very honored to go do that. That was very, very special. The son of the man I did the funeral for, actually a couple of years after that, became an AFA member. And so that was really special. And then I was able to do or I was asked to do a funeral for a Marine that lost his life in a training accident down in off of the coast of San Diego. And I was able to come on the military installation down there and perform his funeral. Lance Corporal Chase Sweetwood. And it was a tremendous honor to perform that for his family and for him as well. Other just bloats in general, there's been too many to name that have been very, very powerful, but there's a moment that happens, and it's not all me, but if I can feel like I'm a part of making this moment happen, that's one of the most special and most powerful things as a Gothi. There's so many of our people claim they believe in the gods, and I mean, claim it honestly. But there's a difference between, yeah, I believe in the gods, and being awestruck, and in that moment knowing the gods are there, they are listening, this is 100% real, and never being able to go back. And the difference between those two, you don't realize until you've crossed that threshold. But there's a moment when you're conducting a bloat, and either during the bloat or after you finish, you see in that person's eyes that they went into that bloat thinking the gods were real, and they left knowing our gods are real. And if I can be some small part of that process of making that happen, that is tremendously moving. And I've been fortunate enough to have that happen on several occasions. So we got another question up here from American Beowulf. Why do you guys use the word church? Is it a political thing? I wouldn't say it's a political thing. I'd say it's a practical thing. Our houses of worship are hofs. We have a name for those. We have a historically attested name for those. And, we'll refer to those as hofs, or you'll hear Svan does this. I do this as well. We'll refer to them as temples. And certainly those are both accurate to what those are. When we talk about our buildings in a context to folks that may not know what a hof means, we use temples or houses of worship because that carries a meaning that everyone understands. But when we talk about the overarching organization of the Asatru Folk Assembly, the only thing that comes close in anybody's English lexicon that they know what means is that we as a whole are a church. Historically, that has most often been used to designate both Christian houses of worship and Christian organizations. But the word itself isn't a Hebrew word. It's ours. Depending on where you read it, it comes from a Lord's house, or it comes from a circle. And I choose to think that it derives from that circle. Our ancestors have often, most often historically in the situations we can find, gathered in circular formations to worship our gods. It's certainly part of our practice in this day and age. And the idea of the connectedness of a ring or a circle, I think, is a really, good way to describe the overarching international organization that is the Asatru Folk Assembly. And when we use the word organization, it sounds too sterile, and it could be a political organization. It could be a charitable organization. There's all kind of utilitarian organizations. We're not that. We're a spiritual organization. And certainly in the United States, and I'd say in the West in general, church is the best thing that encapsulates, a international spiritual organization. So that's why we choose to use that word. Do you have any thoughts on that, Svan?
Yeah, I've always said that the church for me, and especially when I speak of the church, I speak of the Frithgard. I speak of the inner guard, if you will. But if you talk to people and say, my inner guard or my Frithgard, they might look at you a little weird. Church is the same meaning for me. It's that unilateral connectivity that I have with my folk. And I use the word church, I think, once kind of removing more a mental fetter on your head about what that could mean in relation to Christianity, and thinking about what it could mean in relation to Asatru and what it could mean in relation to myself. Once that fetter was removed, I began to realize that my church, especially for talking to people who are not Asatru, talking to people in America that might not understand what a Frithgard is, or an inner guard, or something of that nature, it allowed me to communicate the same meaning, but in a word or a language that they could understand. And we could go down the rabbit hole of trying to understand the meanings behind it. And I think it is important, but and that it has Indo-European roots to expansive power and a place in which power resides and spreads. All of that fits. All of that fits our definition. But instead of again painfully seeking to be alien, the idea is to release the fetter in your head and understand that that's the Frithgard. That's the people around us together. And once you release it, you can move forward, and it doesn't cheapen it or make it less. It's just one more word in the lexicon. I know lots of Latinish words and English words and Nordic words, and I never fret about them that much either. So once you do it, you move on, and then things grow. That's my take on it.
So this is how far behind in the chat we are, because we've had such good conversation. No, seriously, everybody who's participated and asking questions, thank you guys so much for your participation and for your patience. I realize it's taken everybody a long time for us to get to your question. I promise we're not going to leave you guys without answering all of the questions that we have over in the side. I don't know if Svan has a hard end time tonight. We're already over 2 hours and it doesn't feel like it.
Wow.
But I will stick around to make sure you get answers to your questions. The other thing is, if you want them quicker, the folks that donate and do the super chats, those pop right up to the top, and I'll definitely get to those first. But you guys don't owe me anything to answer your questions. I would love to answer all of them, and I do promise to get to them. But I know, like, this one is, I think, coming from when we were talking about the Greek Orthodox art, which over an hour ago, I think. So we've got a question. Hello, Matt. Does AFA leadership think similarly about Catholic art from the Italian Renaissance? Many of them were Greco-Roman pagan scenes. Yes and no. So yes, we absolutely. I suppose I can officially speak for AFA leadership, but I'm sure everybody's got their different preferences and art styles. Renaissance art is beautiful. It's beautiful in so many different ways, depending on the medium and depending on the artist. I would say less. I'm less moved by the pagan art in the Renaissance because I don't think it's coming from a genuine place. I'm more moved by the Christian art of the Renaissance when I know the artist is a devout Christian, because they put their soul into what they're doing, and it's a testament of faith. And there could have been some of those artists that did have pagan proclivities that let that go in the Greco-Roman pagan scenes, but I don't think that was the norm. The art, especially Svan's art, is this matrix of good art and piety that come together to make a really beautiful whole. And I see that more in the Renaissance Christian art than I do in the recreation of pagan scenes. But no, I think most all Renaissance and Baroque art that I've seen is really beautiful to me. And I like the realism, just blows my mind and is amazing. I'd say of the two, what's gone into certainly the requests I've made or the commentary I've given on Svan's work is I like the iconography of the Orthodox, but I think that both are really beautiful European expressions of piety. I've got a question from Tim. So Alsherjargothi Matt, I asked Witan Svan this question earlier, and I would like you to answer if you don't mind. What would you like from the folk? Thanks. So just like Svan, this is a really good question, and it is worth giving a little bit of thought on. And I think that my answers are similar in a lot of ways to Svan's, and I think rightly so, because he and I and the rest of the Witan discuss this a lot. Piety and courage. And just a couple of things, like I would encourage everyone and ask everyone to approach our gods with the reverence, the worship, and the piety due to the literal gods of our folk. I think it's hard for us to adjust the way we behave if we're not if we don't come from a place of being pious or being religious, to integrate that as an adult into how you behave in a religious context is a challenge, and it's a process, and I understand that. But the more I've seen the AFA worship the gods instead of, yo, Thor's my dog, homie, the more that we actually treat them like gods, the more that I've seen them bless us and that relationship grow stronger and closer. And the next thing I'd like to say is courage. And when I say courage, one of the things that our folk truly need to rebuild within themselves is courage. We've got some hard guys. We've got some guys that seen a lot of different things in their lives. We've got veterans. We've got guys that have been involved in a lot of scary situations on the street and in other avenues of life. And they're courageous when it comes to a fist fight. But when it comes to putting their name and their face out in the public sphere and standing proudly as an Asatru and as a member of the Asatru Folk Assembly, very, very scared of a lot of things, very scared of their identity being out there, very scared of taking a public stand with us. And I would ask those people to shore up their courage and to, where they can, be proud of who they are and stand proudly with us. And the more of us do that, the better it'll be for the next group of us coming up, the better it'll be for our children and for their children. So that's what I would ask. Still catching up with questions here. This is for Matt about the icon question. I am Greek, so being Greek Orthodox is all I know. How similar will our time in the AFA be compared to what we know, all of us that were Orthodox? Well, though I really love Orthodox iconography, I have never attended an Orthodox service. And I'm not really, I'm certainly not an expert on how what we do would compare with that. One of the amazing things about an Orthodox service and setting, from what I have seen, is the continuous time-honored tradition and grandeur over the past 2 millennium. They have beautiful basilicas, they have beautiful art, they have very established priesthood and a very established tradition. And all that's done by, thousands of years of state assistance and of millions of congregants that are donating of themselves to make it happen. And to be honest, Asatru is not at that stage yet. We are, about 54 years into the rebirth of Asatru. And I think we've done a lot in recent years to establish our Hofs and to codify and elevate our priesthood in our standards and in our competency. I think we've done a lot to establish traditions, but everything is not gilded, and a lot of things are still in a building phase and a new phase. So I think expecting, that venerable church traditions that they have, we're still in the very early phase of building those. So I think that'll be very different. But again, other than that, I'm not very sure how one of their worship services occurs. I think ours is probably different than most. I wish I could answer that question a little bit better for you. And you know what? I know it was my question, but I'm gonna throw it over to Svan and see if he has a little bit more to offer you on that.
Well, can I see that question again? I saw it flash up on the screen briefly. Is there any way to do that again?
Yeah, he'll do that, but I'll read it for you for those listening on the side or listening later to the podcast of this. I am Greek, so being Greek Orthodox is all I know. How similar will our time in the AFA be compared to what we know, all of us that were Orthodox?
It seems I understand or I'm interpreting that question in a certain way. I think that one thing that's a big misconception about Asatru, how similar will our time in the AFA be compared to what we know? All of us that were Orthodox. I mean, I think that the biggest thing to understand is that we are taking note and honoring certain key aspects of their spirit, in the sense that of their ideals towards beauty, their ideals towards devotion, their ideals towards creating art. And I think that's something that a lot of people have this misconception about, that Asatru are these shoulder pelted, rune paint faced like troglodytes that are going to come in and try to rip down churches and spit in the face of traditional art. And to be honest, that's not I mean, we have no inclinations of that at all. We respect traditions that were established before us, even Christian ones, in the sense that the European Christians have shown great traits that I think we should absolutely look at, think about, and incorporate some in our own expression. But by no means are we really digging down deep and we could really start to cut into the sinew of the subject about whether or not the faith is native to the European folk. And I have strong opinions about all that, but on the surface, I can absolutely look at those things and find the beauty in them. And I think that there's nothing wrong with us trying to also achieve that European proclivity towards beauty, that I think that and in a way we share. We find a union together in that. It's just ours is to our gods and theirs is to theirs. But if you're Orthodox, if you're coming over from Orthodox into Asatru, one of the things is that you are already kind of bringing some of that attributes that that we were looking at. But it's about removing certain things that are clearly not Asatru, and compartmentalizing other things that are important and good to have around. But it will, I think, evolve into its own thing. There's just some certain things. I'm by no means a traditional painter. I would love to say, like, I was trained in Italy and I was given the insights of masters of European knowledge before me. I wish I could say that, but we have absolute respect for that. I think that and my devotional art is trying to capture something of that nature without all the training, and I try to make up with that in devotion. So I hope that over time these things will evolve and become uniquely Asatru for you, and a sharing point that we can find across the table for those folks who are European, but maybe of a Judaic faith or Judeo faith. But they're still Europeans and they still express a lot of their beliefs in European ways. And I think we could.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, I think this next question relates.
Okay.
Brandy asks, Witan Svan, can you give our folk new to this faith a tidbit of advice on how to start their worship of the gods in their homes?
Yeah. As you can kind of see behind me, I have a cabinet that I've converted. It's my harrow. I did this mainly because I've got small children, so getting things out of reach of children sometimes is very important. I don't want my children to be running around and breaking godsteads or getting into candles and things. But I would say first and foremost is try to find a sacred spot. Creating a harrow. Some people know this as an altar, but the harrow in your home as opposed to maybe a horg outside if you're doing a standing stone outside, or creating one of those. But finding a spot, sacred space, and then finding a repetitive sense of getting yourself out of the mundane. I would say a great place to do that is to attend the Hofs. Go to the Hofs and watch the Gothar and learn from them, and then apply almost like a mini structure of that at home. That orthopraxy that they do at the Hofs can be applied. But speaking of that, I'm intending to do some mini videos on how to express faith at home. But something as simple as obtaining a bowl and a vessel to give gift in, and then that's pretty much all you really need. Outside of that, everything else is whether you've got a blowing horn or bells, whether you're lighting a candle or you're lighting resals and giving gifts of incense to the gods, whether you're giving fruit or things like that. You really need a bowl and a vessel and something in order to accumulate your prayer into the vessel through a form of gift, usually through libation. It doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be mead. I know some people have often asked that whether or not it's milk or it's something that you've made. Maybe I know some people have even given like kombucha because they brew it themselves, or something you pay for, something that you put time in. Holding that vessel with that liquid, praying to the gods, whether verbally out loud or silently, and then pouring it into the vessel, asking the gods to receive it, and then gifting it somewhere sacredly outside. You don't just toss it out. You find a tree, find a horg outside, build a horg of stones outside, and pour the libation down onto the horg stones, and and start doing that. Build your gift cycle. And I think the key fundamental part of that is when you go into loading the libation with your prayer and understanding that you're placing your faith in the well itself. That's where you'll begin to find your communication with the gods coming to life. Your ability to speak to them, maybe through poetics or things like that. And be careful. Don't ask over much. Seek wisdom and give thanks. Lots of thanks, just for anything, and incorporate your ancestors as well. That's the best place to start. The gods, the ancestors, and libation through prayer over a gifted bowl, and placed out, and then just get more detailed as you become more knowledgeable and comfortable, and find your own way, or maybe learn from the Gothar at the Hofs and apply a lot of what they do there into your home life.
All right, next question from Jeff. What is the AFA's view on nature-based things like guardian trees or local water spirits? Are those things more pagan than what the AFA is focused on? It's a good question. I think that those things are often much more individual. I think that the things, by the very nature, no pun intended, of what you asked, those things are localized to a specific area. So I think those come into play a lot more in individual practice at locations, because that's where those spirits are. I know that, typically in an AFA bloat, we invite the gods in, we invite the ancestors in, but we also invite the Landvetir, the land spirits that are there in to participate and to witness the ritual with us. I think those things are very important, but they're much harder to put your finger on. And they're very often something that, in a broadcast like this, we don't talk about. I think those things incorporate, like I said, much more in localized and individual practice, but we absolutely believe in various spirits that occupy the world around us, that perhaps occupy our homes or our lands. We try to make sure we honor the land spirits that occupy our sacred space on all of our Hof grounds. But yeah, that is something that we do believe in. but we don't personify every stick, every rock as having its own spirit. We believe that spirits abide in those places. And I think that's kind of a fundamental distinction as well. But I think that comes up in what Svan just mentioned about home practice. It's a way of respecting the land spirits to pour your libation out on a special tree, or a natural thing that's a focus of the worship for your family and for the land spirits in that area. And that's one of the kind of hallmark reasons that our ancestors would find a spring or a tree or a grove or an area particularly powerful, is they would get a sense that that was an area that the spirits showed favor to or inhabited in some way. And so I think we do carry that on, most of us, in a very small way in our own yards. I mean, if we have a big amount of land, certainly that's different. But even if we have a yard with a tree in it, we make that tree a focal point for that energy. Alistair asks, is there any literature you can share on the folk Futhark? Svan.
Specifically on the folk Futhark? No, this is a brand new thing. I mean, again, you would have to look at each of the individual Futharks. I think that would be the best place to start, is to understand each piece. But I will say one book that's very, very interesting is Exploring the Runes by Nigel Pennick. It's a visual book. It's got a lot of pictures in it of different Futharks, and I found that really, really interesting. I don't know if it's even still available. It's a very large book. Collages of photographs put into this book, but that's one that I that inspired it to begin with, because it had all the Futharks in it right next to each other, and it really started to get the ball rolling on that. But outside of that, I mean, again, your usual sources of runic knowledge, and of course the internet itself. But as far as individual meanings, I mean, they apply across all the Futharks. I didn't change any of the meanings or anything like that, so it's nothing official has come out about it from our end or from my end.
All right, we got another question from Zamo about the producing of food, chickens and crops, for example. It just happens for everyone else. What is different for us when we talk to the gods and offer to them in return? Chickens? I think his question might have been cut off. Svan, can you go ahead and speak to that?
Yeah, I have chickens. I may be a bit of a chicken farmer myself. No, I have always accompanied the fruitfulness of my garden and my animals to Freyr, especially during the time in between Charming of the Plough and Freyfaxi. That seems to be it's culturally and religiously our growing period, our time of preparation for the fields and for the animals. So I hold a lot of devotion to Frey in regards to the fruitfulness and protection of the animals that literally feed my children, and the plants and things that I pull out of the ground. And I think as if you're commercial farmer, this might be something in consideration if you own cattle or livestock, or if you're doing things like harvesting wool from sheep and llama. I mean, that's huge, and I don't have a lot of experience in that, so I wouldn't really speak on that. But if homesteading, homesteading, weekend steading, doing things in which you're doing things in your backyard, or you're doing things on the plot of land you have, yeah, you can absolutely incorporate them into your religious life, because they do feed you. It is a form of your Feo, or your Fehu. It's that power that you put in, the work you put in, and oftentimes the things you get out, and sometimes the things that are outside of your control. Having bouts of where your livestock begin to pass away, or sometimes the funny stories that you have where you have to deal with them because they're particularly ornery or particularly not intelligent. So some of that is funny, and you'll learn a lot about life. I think it's also very, very important that you do it with your children. I had a couple of my they got afflicted with blindness, and we had to put them down, and it's a big explanation for my eldest son what the menfolk needed to do in order to stop the suffering of these poor animals. So my son and I, went through the business of taking care of them, and I think there's huge lessons that we can learn about the spirits of animals and how they return back to that tree, to the source of all that life, and begin the cycle again. So I hope that
Sierra
answers.
asks, not sure if this has been asked yet, but Witan Svan, you are hailed as one of the most knowledgeable about the lore and sagas and such. Which of the sagas is your favorite?
Oh, Icelandic sagas, or what stories in the Eddas? I mean, I have to say, okay, Icelandic saga, Egil saga. Egil Skallagrimsson is top-notch reading. It was just great. He go fighting on the Baltic Sea, to fighting in Scotland, to the tragedy of losing his sons, and his poetic nature, and the dichotomy of how he could be a wretched foe, or a really, really beautiful poet, and a lamenting father, and dealing with like Eirikur Blóðax, and that, all that intrigue with York and all of that. So as far as the sagas go, I would definitely say Egil saga would be my first and foremost favorite. As far as the prose Eddas and the Eddas, I mean, the Voluspa is probably, I spent so much time studying the Voluspa in its variant translations. The Havamal is very good, and I have a lot of love for it, and studying it, and its the iterations of how it could possibly be 3 poems kind of comprised into one, and a lot of the mystery behind all of that. But the Voluspa is by far my favorite, because it just gives the front to the back. And the way that it's done, the Odin going down and seeing the Volva and raising her and retching her out of the ground, and then the interactions that they have with each other, and the portents of doom that's breathed from her death lungs, that's so amazingly awesome that I can't express it enough. That's one of my favorite, is the Voluspa.
So guys, it's been 2.5 hours and we're still going. Realize people on the East Coast, and certainly some of our international folks, the time is not perfect for you guys. Please be aware that you can watch these replayed, or this does come out on Fridays on Spotify as a podcast. So if anybody's got to go to bed or whatever, please do check back in on those. As promised, we will hit all these questions before we sign off tonight. Human Manipulation wants to advise us to pray for South Africa. Absolutely. I think we should all take the time to pray for our folk in South Africa, but more than just praying for our folk in South Africa, if you would like, and you're so inclined, if you wanted to donate to our South Africa fund at runestone.org, every quarter we pay out the South Africa Family Relief Project that has that gives food and provides housing and takes care of some of our folks over there who are suffering some of the violence and the persecutions over there. What's Witan Svan's opinion on Marvel Thor and Marvel Odin and Marvel Frigga?
Can I hide my disdain for all of that? No, I don't think I can.
Video.
The franchise, and the only, I was told by a very wise man to always try to find the silver lining in things. So I think the silver lining, of course, would be that keeping the names of the gods alive in our overall arching society is about the biggest benefit I could find out of that. Outside of that, the mixing of things, that as far as the lore, it's abysmal. It's really hard. It's really hard to stomach in a lot of times where I'm just like, what are they? Why? But I've come to also understand one thing that's very, very interesting is our gods are heroic. Our gods are bombastic in our, especially with interactions with our kids. Our children love to hear about the gods and the stories. And when you read them, the stories, the actual stories, there's no less a difference. I think it's just, you have one that's on a media drip that's like right on, it's right into the veins from the television. And we have to combat that by telling the actual stories of our gods and really just getting into it. I think also too, we've been making some moves towards the idea of building children's books and having, me and maybe some others doing art to show the gods in the stories. Actually, red Thor with red beard, leaping over and crushing his enemies and reclaiming his hammer or driving them out and off the edges of cliffs and things. It just really, really great stuff. But as far as Marvel goes, I'm not a huge fan at all.
All right, Svan. So, which of the Hoff murals that you painted do you feel really touched you spiritually? As I'm sure they all did, which one invoked a feeling the most?
Oh, that's again, I hold great faith to Odin. I always have, and to Frigga. But I cannot lie at all. It's Thor's Hoff. I had a moment at Thor's Hoff. I was in the middle. I was about 3/4 of the way actually painting, and I was almost near the end. And all of a sudden, I heard some strange noises going on outside, and it just sounded like almost like static being played over a speaker. And I came down from the ladder, and I opened the door, and looking out across, I see this thunderstorm is just loaded in front of the Hoff. And right as I open the door and kind of step out, the wind, the pressure drop, the movement. And I had no doubt in my mind at that moment what was going on. So I opened the doors to Thor's Hoff and I politely stepped out of this off to the side. And all I could do was pensively wait and hope that, and I was 100% sure that I was going to get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Like I had no doubt in my mind. I was just pensively waiting for the results of this inspection. And the wind started to die. The storm showed up. A light rain started to come down, and I knew right then I was given permission to go back in and continue my work. And that was something that truly happened. And I still have that picture. It's actually on my personal profile. I'll post it in our social medias. But I still have that picture. I recently found it again because I got a new phone, and yeah, that was a truly moving moment for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember you telling me about that as it happened. Yeah, it's really special, and there's got to be something to that being your first one as well. Cliff asks, Alsherjargothi Matt, you mentioned that you did funerals for non-AFA members. Does the AFA do weddings or baby namings, etc., for non-AFA members? Why or why not? I'm glad you asked that, Cliff. I think it's good for everybody to kind of understand. As for if we do weddings or baby namings for non-members, no, we do not. The difference in funerals is that person's life here in Midgard has ended, and what's done is done. That is an opportunity to honor that person's life and to do them that honor and that service, and to do something nice for the family. And we would like to do that. We really encourage everyone, if we're good enough to perform your wedding and if we're good enough to perform your baby naming, then certainly we're good enough for you to be a member of our faith community and for you to be a participant in our religion. We don't, for the same token, we don't do show weddings. You know, if we do a wedding, it's a legally binding wedding, because this is very serious to us, and we're not going to expend our spiritual might, our spiritual hamingya to people that don't want to actually participate in what we're doing and being a part of it. And so it's because we take it very seriously. It's not meant as any slight. But yeah, I think that's good for folks to know. And if people want us to do their wedding, then by all means join. We'd love to not only perform your wedding, but be a part of your lives and be a part of your relationship with the folk and the gods. Looks like we've got another donation from Ruben. Thank you, Ruben. Ruben says, I would love to see a movie about Jesus being a comedic relief with his apostles like some kind of Dirty Dozen traveling Middle East kicking asses. Oh, and Mary being a stunning and brave woman oozing with girl power. I hope Marvel gets to do it. As silly as that may sound, that's apples to apples. I don't think that's a reach. That's exactly what's being done. And I think that's what a lot of us feel about the Thor and Asgardian references in Marvel. So we have another question about the spirits. We have an apple tree with all of our past animals buried under it, with rocks as markers for each. Is this spot one I should consider designating for offerings? Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And I think that's really cool that you have that. That's really special. I think you have already made that a powerful space. And I think directing your spiritual energies towards that space when you place your offerings is only going to add to that and help that cycle of spiritual energy that you have there. I think that's the perfect spot for it.
Lots of power in the apple tree too. Fruit-bearing trees.
Fruit-bearing trees were certainly, the evidence that we have suggests that was, a preferred medium to carve runes in, because trees that would bear fruit and bear life in that way had an extra power to them. Michelle asks, what are the qualifications for building an AFA kindred? Basically 3 or more adult AFA members. That gets you started. Then contacting our kindred coordinator, Jason Gallagher, at jgallagher@runestone.org. And there's, I believe, a 6-month probationary period to get that going. The idea isn't just to be a kindred, but an AFA kindred, a kindred where the AFA is central to what you guys are built around and to your faith. So those AFA kindreds are something we're very proud of, and they're defined by their loyalty to the AFA, and that gives them something solid to build around. Witan Svan, the Michelangelo of the AFA. I have made that reference before.
Sorry, I made a joke. I think that you have really helped me understand. Actually, the Alsherjargothi has really helped me understand my place in this all, because I think I came into it not seeing myself as a mural painter or these things, but the Alsherjargothi has really kind of said, there could be a time in which your art is seen as an expression of an era, just like there are expressions of art in eras before, from the 80s and the late 70s, and Asatru when it was formulating and getting started, and that there's possibilities of more art and expression from genuine Asatru faith believers in the future. So I'm hoping, and I really think it'd be really cool that my children and folk in the church, or their generations thereafter, might look back and say, oh, this was during the time that Svan was doing a lot of the artwork in the temples, and this is kind of the stuff he introduced, and I think that would be really cool. I'm humbled but honored at the same time.
Do people get non-participation trophies in the AFA? Not sure if I understand the question. I'll take a stab at it. Certainly, on the face of it, no, we're not going to give anybody a reward for not participation. I think maybe you're asking if we do give any kind of awards for people that do participate. If that's the case, we always try to acknowledge our people that go above and beyond and do nice things. Usually one of the ways people show that going above and beyond is by volunteering for one of our leadership positions. And if they do that and they, become a folk builder, then we do give out every year a folk building excellence award to, the folk builder that we think has performed the best in that previous year. And so that's something we've been doing for 6 years now, I believe. So I think that's my best attempt at that question. Kind of to follow up, Sierra asks, what are the qualifications for becoming an apprentice folk builder, and Gothar, respectively? Well, as Sierra laid out, that's a progression of things. Within the last couple of years, we've made that the case, and we've unified that tree to where the steps to getting to be a Gothi are: you first need to become a folk builder. And in order to be a folk builder, you need to do your time apprenticing to be a folk builder. Qualifications for that are you have to want to, and you have to be willing to make the time to devote to doing it. It's not something you need to come in with a great amount of qualification, other than with piety and a desire to build the AFA. Now, so much is involved in that, and our apprentice folk builders and folk builders work very, very hard. And a Gothi, something to keep in mind, isn't just a Gothi. They're a folk builder as well. They have all the responsibilities a folk builder has, and then their additional Gothic responsibilities. But yeah, some of the things that are really important for a folk builder is to be reachable and interactive on our social media, to build relationships with other AFA leaders. It's a lot of back-end stuff that doesn't necessarily sound glamorous, but it allows us to have things work as efficiently as they do now. And we're really lucky to live in a time where we have amazing folk builders that have done such an amazing job. So much of what they do, you guys will never see or never know, but I assure you, it's one of the reasons that we're able to be so successful. And we'll get some of our folk builders on in the coming weeks and months on this program. So Sierra also asks, which Hofs are you guys most excited for? Obviously, we can't wait to see them all erected, but which ones are each of you looking forward to the most? Svan, let's go. You first.
Tiershoff, definitely Tiershoff. I really like. I think Tiershoff first, but also Bragishoff, and the idea of the arts and poetics and music and things of that, and also Forsetishoff, because I think that's something that we greatly need in our societies, an understanding of both legality and the ability for us to reach agreements and to find wisdom in him, and in order to better correlate our law, our internal cultural law. But yeah, Tiershoff is my first answer on that one.
I'd say that I would also say Tiershoff. We've got some special plans for that. I think Tiershoff is going to be a really important one for us. And on a personal note, one that I think, I'm very excited to see is Ullershoff. I think that would be really special, and it all depends on where we end up putting that. But yeah, I think that would be a really special one, and I've always kind of been hopeful and excited about that one. Just another note to you guys, on the 13th of next month, we're having the dedication at Njordshof. And then the following weekend, we're having Fall Fest at Baldershof in Minnesota. I'm going to turn and burn, and I'm going to be at both of those. If you guys can make it to either or both of those, I would love to see you guys there. I think we're running about to the end of the questions, and it's running pretty long. So let's go ahead, and if you have any last things you have to get in, go ahead and get them in, and then let's close off questions. We're almost at 3 hours tonight, and we'll try to get these last ones answered for you guys. At Midsummer, we do a Viking Games. Would it be possible to start a Odin Olympics of a sort? Once a year, once every other year, hosting a weekend of just showing off different skills and feats of strength. Is it possible? Yes. Do we have plans on doing that right now? No. But I think, if we first, I think that any of those games to where we can show strength and skill and athleticism and have fun brings our folk together and is a cool, fun thing to do. If we did do, something that you're suggesting, like an Odin Olympics, I'd want it to be serious athleticism and not just, goofing around backyard games. If we did it, I would want it to genuinely be a rigorous, athletic, very serious events to where, much in the spirits of the original Olympics, that the athleticism itself would be a devotional honoring to our gods and something a little bit more serious. But yeah, I'd be open to that at some point. I don't think we're at that point just yet. All right, another question. Might seem silly, but genuine question about offerings. Pets. Mainly because Mom doesn't know I went pagan, and a nice ritual for our cats, dogs, ducks, geese, deer would be a bridge for her. Svan, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, wait. First and foremost, pagan. I say first shed that word. You're coming back. If you believe in the gods, you are Asatru. You are true to the Aesir or the Aesir, and so claim that, and so that way you're not working from a deficit word like pagan or heathen or again some sort of insulting word. But that's just semantics. One thing that you could definitely do is a blessing of the animals. If you're doing a blessing of the animals, the idea of taking some sort of medium, whether it's milk, mead, sacred water drawn from somewhere, water that even if you draw water from a source that, say for instance, a river source or a lake source that might not be where it looks murky, and you go through the process of purifying it. You actually take time to filter it and go through it. You're actually weaving a lot of your weird into it. You can then ask the gods to bless that water to protect your flock, to protect your herds, and incorporate if you're trying to get your family into it, absolutely ask them to hold the bowl with you and pray into the water, or pray into the milk, or into the mead, or whatever it might be, because obviously you might not want to cover your hands like a sticky sweet substance. It's kind of counterintuitive in certain sense, but placing your faith into that medium and then sprinkling the animals, or one of you taking the animals and walking them by the person that's holding the bowl that has the prayers in it, and that they brush the animals with a tine or a small twig that's dipped into the bowl and then blessed over the animals. I think that's a good way if you're talking about blessing and giving offering and asking the gods to protect and to also incorporate your family. And they could pray really as they fill the bowl. I think the idea would be praying to the ancestors, praying to the land spirits, or just praying for protection and placing that within that median, and then blessing the animals with it would be a great first step for them to understand the process of our gift cycling and how we gift cycle and how we kind of interact with divinity, whether it's the land spirits, our ancestors, or the gods. So,
okay. Next question, Braggishoff. When? I can't give you an answer on that chronologically, but I can give you an answer of that in order. So we need to pay off Njordshof. And once we've paid off Njordshof and met a couple other qualifications that we're working on, we're going to get Freeshof. Following Freeshof, we're going to establish Tiershof. Following Tiershof will be Bragishof. So it's all how fast we can get those things accomplished. At the rate we're going, I don't think it'll be very long. American Beowulf asks, can you get a Hof made near Holiday, Florida, mid-Florida? Yes, we have one. It's called Njordshof, and it's only 3 hours away. Absolutely, it would be great to live in a day where, every town has a Hof in it, and we'll get there one of these days. But in the near future, one of the challenges is to get our Hofs spread out enough to where all of our folk are able to attend these events and come and worship the gods at one of our Hofs. 3-hour drive to one of our Hofs is it's a long drive, but it's very doable for a lot of our people. I know people drive substantially more than that to go to our Hofs on any of our scheduled days that we have an event at a Hof. So yeah, it's a little bit of a distance, but it's well worth traveling to. I think it'll be, before Florida comes up in the rotation again, it'll probably be a little bit. We've got a lot of other folks to make sure they have a Hof close to. But I would encourage you to do what it takes to go that 3 hours up to that Hof if it's important to you.
I think a lot of people don't realize the gas time that you and I think a lot of leadership put in. I travel 3.5 hours with my children and my wife, and we all go. So if you can make it, if we can make it, you can make it, get that road time.
All right. So do you have to be a folk builder to get folks together and do moots in your area? If I'm not a folk builder, how do I know who's in my area and who to contact in order to have a successful moot? First, no, you do not have to be a folk builder to get folks together. We would love for all of you guys to get folks together, and our folk builders would love to help you do that. If you want to find out how to make that happen, how to contact people, how to set up an event in your area, reach out to your local folk builder. You can find your local folk builders on each of our Hofs sites. Nick will go ahead and throw those sites up for you guys to take a look at. And then the follow-up question to that, also by Sierra, is, and what is a moot? A moot is a word that basically means a meeting. It's, any of our meetings where our folks get together outside of a Hof event, we typically refer to as moots. And that's all that is. Don't be intimidated by the word. If you just want to have people over your house, we call it a moot, and that's great. If you want to have people over to a restaurant to share a meal or out to the bar to share a drink, if you're doing that to get together with other AFA members, we'll call it a moot, and that's fantastic. Llamas plans. Svan, you want to take that one?
You mean the celebrating of llamas?
That is the question.
Is that?
I don't think it's about Lorenzo.
Right. the renegade. And we're talking about Laufmass or what we call Freyfaxi. Freyfaxi is, for us, especially the culmination of Laufmass or Loafmass at the end of the harvest season, the second harvest season. I can tell one thing. I can't wait because I'm going to start seeing the bread horses. That's a cultural thing for us to see those horses being made and decorated and pictures of them and all their glory, whether good or bad. They're awesome. It's just a great time of that year. I know that each of the Hofs will probably be holding, harvest festival. And, bread, beer, things that be showcased there. I think we always kind of do a thing where we try to have people bring food that they want to showcase specifically in relation to the harvest. Oats and wheat. If you're on the low carb diet, it's the day to lament and shed a tear and then let go and let carbs happen. It's a beautiful time. I think obviously it's the end of the planting season. It's the end of the entirety of the season, and it brings close what started at charming of the plow. And so that once Freyfaxi, Lofmas, Lamas, once that begins to pass, We turn our faces towards the twilight of the year, and we begin to see the quelding, and we begin to see the winter time come. So it's the last hurrah. I think all the temples are going to be, given to that. And I think that, if you're an AFA member or if you're looking to celebrate at home, there's a lot of cool stuff. And I'll post recipes for that horse, and let's see some bread horses and give thanks to Frey as he returns back to the ethereal realms, as he goes back with his retinue of light, and Gertha bids him farewell. I mean, I guess that's all I got on that one. I don't.
All right. Well, do we have any thoughts on Arminianism? Let's go get you first, Svan.
I do not have as much a huge background on it. I know of some, maybe two in particular, within the AFA that have a very huge corpus of knowledge about the Armanen Futhark, and I would always guide people to them. My knowledge of it is more or less structural, to understand the movements, and I still see it as a possibility of delving into hero worship when I can try to turn my head towards Maestro von List and look at him and give homage to him as he is a hero of Odenshof. So maybe at a certain point I can turn my devotionals towards him and kind of delve into his works and pray to him and ask him for guidance as well, or at least give homage to him as an ancestor of the pinnacle parts of runic lore that he's given. But as of right now, it's just structural for me.
So, I mean, my thoughts. First, in the AFA, we honor Meister Guido von List as one of our heroes. His reawakening of our spirituality at that time was very important to what we do today. And I think that there's genuine inspiration behind his runes. I can't say I'm super familiar with the current iteration of the Armanen order or how that all works. I think that the AFA is the vehicle for Alsatru and for the worship of Odin, which Meister von List was all about. And as a child, he vowed to build a temple to Odin. We honor him at our temple to Odin in a way of posthumously fulfilling that for him. And so I think that there's great things that way. But as far as a vehicle moving forward and moving that mission ahead, I think the AFA is the option for that. Zamo says, no insult meant. I say pagan as an outsider, understand. How do we describe ourselves to others? Folkish? It's hard to perceive it from an outside view. That's one of the reasons that I always use the word Asatru. I want us to own that. I want us to define that. So some people prefer heathen or pagan, but those are terms that others called us in relation to themselves. I like the word Asatru because it is a self-defining, and a lot of people think it means a belief in the gods, but it doesn't. It means a troth with, a loyalty to those gods. So it doesn't just mean we believe in the Aesir. It means that we are loyal to the Aesir. So I use that. I use that exclusively. The more you use other words to describe it, the more it loses its power and its meaning. The more you keep all of that meaning harnessed in one word that defines what we are, the more powerful it is. So we refer to ourselves as Asatru. And you say folkish, I think we're getting past a time where you need to say folkish. The only Asatru that's legitimate is folkish Asatru. Anything else is simply not Asatru. And we've seen others who are, universalists claiming to be Asatru no longer want to claim that because it's too associated with us. Instead, they'd rather call themselves anything else, and that's fine by me. Vril says, I've worn an Irminsul around my neck for over a decade now, since it speaks more deeply to me as opposed to the Mjolnir. Is this sacrilege? No, of course it's not sacrilege. I think it is less practical, just like I think that, just like I said earlier about using the term Asatru instead of something else, it's not wrong to call our faith a different word, but it scatters that cohesiveness and it makes it less recognizable to other people. If we all wear Mjolnirs, then people have a very strong association of what the Mjolnir is and what it represents. If, those of us particularly connected to Thor wear a Mjolnir, and the ones to Odin wear a spear, and perhaps the ones to Tyr wear an Irminsul, and with Frey wear a boar, it scatters that cohesion, and it doesn't have the same impact when somebody sees it and like, aha, a hammer, that guy's Asatru. So, I'd suggest wearing it for that purpose, but it's not sacrilegious. I'm sure the gods are very honored by your choice of religious medallion.
And culturally inside, I think everybody inside our faith wouldn't take that as offense or anything at all. It's more or less engaging with people outside the guard, outside the yeah.
All right, guys, it's over 3 hours. I've got 2 more questions, and then I'm going to call a hard stop, and we'll make sure we have Svan back with us very soon because he's doing an amazing job. Matt and Svan, any plans or thoughts on establishing Hofs outside the U.S.? Svan, go first.
Oh, wow. You just threw that right on me. I think first and foremost, our brothers and sisters overseas have they have obligations and things that they need to hurdle over. They need to really get organized and start, not getting caught up in a lot of the stuff that, this is the way we do things here. That's the way you do things over there. No, just do things that succeed, and the things we're doing here are succeeding. So do them there and succeed. And then I think that, there's a lot of modernity in, especially like, I live in America. I've been here since I was very, very little, but I have family. I have very close siblings in Iceland and things like that. So I'm familiar with, especially like Scandinavia. I understand there's modernity. There's a lot of notions of things where they have a hard time getting into the spiritual life of things sometimes. And but I think that there's a lot of potential for all of them to move and get together. And once they do and start to create that community, absolutely, I think we should look at them as viable things. I think there's nothing, Asatru Folk Assembly, I know I would be very much in support and would lean to ask the Alsherjargothi to really consider it, that, building temples in the ancestral homes of our folk are paramount. We just, when it comes to the freedoms of real estate, the freedoms of property, the freedoms of tax, in other countries, it becomes very, very difficult. And so I think those are hurdles that we need on both sides of the water to really tackle and get down. We need somebody on the ground there really working through the network of whatever type of legalities they have to go through, the linguistic stuff. Obviously, we're coming from a linguistic deficit. If it's in Italy, or if it's in not England, but Sweden, or in Denmark or something like that, we would have to move with a lot of guidance and help. But I think that would be awesome. South Africa, Australia.
So I think that would be awesome too. All the logistical challenges Svan mentioned are a real thing. Now, they're challenges we would rise to, and I would very much like to make happen. First and foremost, we need to establish healthy and sizable communities of AFA members in these other countries. On top of that, we need to have reliable leadership in these other countries that will, we've learned that it's not just about establishing a Hof. That's a challenge in and of itself, but it's about maintaining and caring for it and being there to occupy it and to make use of it and to sanctify it for years to come. And we need those stable communities and those stable leaders. Right now, we're not there internationally. I would love to see them. I think that Sweden would probably be the first, if everything went the way that it's currently going, they would probably be the first country for us to have an international Hof in. But I think that, within our lifetimes, a Hof in Sweden, one in perhaps Australia, and I would love to see one in South Africa. But again, that all depends on folks in those areas stepping up and it making sense. We have to put a Hof where it's going to be well attended, to where we have leadership, to where we have Gothar. We need a priest to officiate at our Hof. So all those things would need to happen in order to make that a realistic situation. And I hope it does very soon. And last question of the night, American Beowulf. Does Newfoundland have a Hof? No, it does not. I think a Canadian Hof would be a neat thing as well. I think if we did one in Canada, it would probably be in Ontario right now with the way things are growing, or perhaps British Columbia, but we'll see. Thank you guys so much for the amazing talk tonight with all the great questions. I appreciate your patience. Thank you so much, everybody who's donated. And thank you very much, my good friend, Witan Svan Herul. You have been an amazing guest. It's been a pleasure to have you on and talk with you this evening.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Well, it's been over 3 hours. It's late for Svan. Let him get some sleep. I'm going to get myself some dinner. Hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA. And remember, victory never sleeps.
Hail.